All right. It is Irish Breakdown After Dark. It is our Upon Further Review podcast. Welcome, everyone, in Irish Breakdown Nation. I am Vince Taddeo. I am the football analyst here at irishbreakdown.com. And with me, as always, is the publisher, the man, the myth, the legend, Brian Driscoll. He is ready to talk about Notre Dame football because we both broke down the film. We both rewatched what frankly was Notre Dame's most complete game, start to finish, that they've had all season.
Oh gosh.
And I mean, and it's not close.
It's not.
Well, and it's funny because the week leading up to, on two different shows that I was on, we talked about, has Notre Dame had that complete game yet? You know, what is the closest to the complete game that they've had? And it was tough to kind of come up with an answer. You know what I mean?
Right.
Tough no longer.
No,
it's tough no longer.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to throw in the last two seasons, I think you could have the same thing. And look, there's always going to be that, well, Georgia Tech sucked thing, right? Well, okay, but so did Virginia, and so did Navy, and so did USC, and so did Toledo. And you know what I mean? Like, we could go down this list, and Notre Dame's never done to a team what they did on Saturday. And it's more so about, there's been times in this offense has been really good. There's been times in this, a lot of times this defense has been really good.
Yeah.
And what we haven't seen is that both teams playing for 60 minutes, and especially offensively. We've seen the defense flat dominated Purdue and Wisconsin, right? I mean, we've seen this defense do this before. They did it to Virginia last week. They did it to Navy. I mean, they did it to USC for 3 quarters, you know. Sure. I mean, what we haven't seen is both sides doing it for 60 minutes in the same game.
Well, and I will also say that I think this is the first time that the defense did it for 4 quarters. Like, it was dominance throughout.
Well, but so you don't think they dominated Virginia last week for 4 quarters, or Navy?
More so this game than they did before.
More so, sure. But I mean, for me, it's like you gave up 3 points to Virginia. You shut them down for 4 quarters. You did the same thing to Navy. You know, I think this was the most emphatic.
Yes.
But I also think the part of that too, Vince, is the offense doing their job early allowed the defense to really go on the attack against Georgia Tech. It allowed Marcus Freeman and his defense to stay locked in to do our game plan, because now we've got a 10-0 lead, which the defense gave them, you know, but it's 17, and then by the end of the first quarter, it's 24-0.
Right.
Now Marcus Freeman's like, okay, let's really go on the attack. And
that's what we talked about, right? We talked about the offense having to do their part so that the defense could pin their ears back and go to town. Right. And that's what occurred. And it was fantastic to watch.
It really was. It was fun to watch. And it was one of those things where when I popped it back in, I tried to look at it with the lens of Georgia Tech really stinks, and tried to look at it from almost like I was trying to downplay it. Like I wanted to go with a different mindset, because last night I was so fired up and I was, man, this is a great performance. And I wanted to kind of go into it with sort of let me be overly critical, because that's what I always did as a coach. Sure. Like when we had those great games against a team that we knew going in wasn't very good, you know, you feel good at the time and you're excited at the time. But as a coach, you go back in and you almost want to have an ultra critical look to make sure that there aren't things that you're like, boy, if we do that against a good team, that's not going to work out as well. And it really comes down to, I think was it James last night, the guy named James that asked that question about, you know, look, how much of this was Georgia Tech stinking, and how can you tell, right? Well, that's what you do when you go down and break the film down again as a coach but again, Vince, there's some little things here and there that we're going to get into. There are some things that I observed positively and negatively from the game, but I still felt as good about this game coming out after the rewatch, after breaking it down, as I did last night. It was a well-coached, well-prepared, well-executed physical performance. Right. And, you know, I watched Jeff Collins' post-game interview today. It's like he was getting physically beat up. His whole his whole press conference after, he's a pretty energetic guy, and he was like, well, we just we got beat physically and we got out coached. He just looked like he wanted to cry. And that, to do that to a coach, you got to really just that's a helpless feeling.
Been there.
Yeah, that's a helpless feeling where it's like
at one point or another.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Again, and sometimes it's the best teams you've been on. I've brought up, how I felt after the Mountain Union game. It was just like, there's nothing we could have done. There's nothing we could have done different. There's nothing there's no coaching we could have done. There's nothing
there's no
our
play
kids
call,
couldn't have played harder.
Yeah.
They couldn't have executed our game plan better. It's just that team just destroyed us in every way possible. And, when I was at Duquesne, we got blown out by Penn one time. And it was just a sick feeling because you're like, they are not better than us like that. Right.
Yeah.
But then there's that time where it's just like, it wouldn't have mattered what we did, and that's how Jeff Collins felt we just, it's like we just got absolutely physically, emotionally, mentally, schematically, thoroughly dismantled in every way possible. And that's a good place to be if you're the other team that did that to them. And that's what we saw last night, was just as I tried hard, Vince, to try to find things to be critical of, because that's what this show's about, right? This is what the Upon Further Review is about.
Point.
It's about
the whole point.
Really diving into the film and giving people sort of a coach's view, because as I've said, coaches are almost always going to watch the film and have a difference of opinion on something coming out as they had going in. And there is some of that. We are going to talk about that. But that was, Vince, a thoroughly dominant and fun football game to watch, because I enjoy a team that's well prepared. I enjoy a team that's well coached, and I enjoy a team that executes. And that's been part of my frustration with Notre Dame a lot this season, has been, well, they just weren't prepared to play to their potential. There is no doubt whatever Brian Kelly and Marcus Freeman and Tommy Reese and Mike Elston and Lance Taylor and everybody else on that staff, whatever they did last week, they need to try to bottle that, or write that recipe down and try to figure out a way to replicate it, because this is the team we have been waiting, Vince, all season for. People want to know why I thought this team could be 12-0, or why you thought this could be a playoff team. It's because I thought performances like this were possible on a more consistent basis.
And I thought they were possible long ago.
Having said that, the thing that I said to myself is, I would rather peak too late than too early.
Yeah, I get that.
And that's the thing about this Notre Dame team, is now not peaking early could hurt them, because they may not get in the playoff. But if they do, this is about as good of a November Notre Dame football team as we've seen. And yes, they've played bad teams, but
it's bigger
than that. They played bad teams in 2019. And I remember coming out of some of those 2019 games saying, they just beat a bad team. That, like BC. You remember the BC game in 2019? They won 40-7. And you and I talked after the game, and I was like, BC sucks. They just out. It was 16-7, and AJ Dillon's running down the middle of the field uncovered. Fortunately, Adi Ogundeji gets a sack, and they can't find him, right? There, you could look at the Stanford game and be like, they just outclassed Stanford. Stanford just doesn't belong on the field there. It just, there's some thing. It did some good things, and I remember thinking about Iowa State, same thing. It was like, that team just really sucks. That's not even like a really fun game to enjoy, because you're not really coached well. You're not really playing at an elite level. You're just beating up on really bad teams. I felt that way about Duke in 2019. I felt that way about Boston College. I felt that way about New Mexico that year. I felt that way about Boston College. I felt that way, about a lot of those games down the stretch in 2019 when they played really bad teams. This is different. This is what they've done the last couple weeks is different to me, because you're starting to see certain parts of this team peak. Yeah. And we saw stretches, and I'm going to have some articles about that this week. We've seen stretches of it, like the offense in the second, third, and fourth quarter against Navy. It's like, oh, okay, that's what this offense is capable of in the pass game and some other things. But you're like, yeah, but Navy sucks. And then you come out the first half against Virginia, you're like, boy, this is. And then they called off the Dogs in the second half, and you're like, okay, can they get that? But this game, they started that way, Vince, and they finished that way,
even with backups in the game, which is what we were asking.
They were still physically beating Georgia Tech up when they put their backups in the game, and we'll get into that a little bit too. But
before since we're kind of talking big picture right now, I want to put Nolan Sanchez has a really good comment, and I think it applies to what we're talking about. He says, awesome that we beat Tech 55-0. Really interested how badly Georgia beats Tech or to see if they have trouble with them. It's good that Georgia plays them the week after we did and not Notre Dame beats them week 3. That you and I talked about that. I don't know if it was in the show or if it was off the air or whatever.
It was in the show. We talked about that during one of our shows this week.
Okay. Yeah, that it is important. It's a data point. Is it the
it's not an end all be all? Right?
No, it's not.
It's not going to rank Notre Dame ahead of Georgia.
No, right? No. Even if Georgia loses in the SEC championship, Notre Dame, I highly doubt would rank ahead of Georgia. Okay. But
as we talked about last night, it just would depend on what the score was. But it's not the point of what we're discussing here. Yeah.
Yes. But it's a data point. And I think that I do think it is beneficial that Tech goes and plays Georgia at home, right? They play them at home. I don't know if that'll matter a whole lot, but they do play them at home. And we'll see what happens. It's something I'm going to keep my eye on at the very least.
Absolutely.
Rivalry weekend.
Absolutely. And John A1, we will get to your super chat. We're going to hold off on that because we're going to address that particular topic, and I don't want to bring it up and then go back to it later. So I just want to let you know I see it, and it's part of it's one of our notes to discuss during the show today.
We have an outline,
so we will get that going. So Vince, let's start off talking about the offense. Let's look at what the offense did, and I think the first thing for me, my first takeaway was I thought Jack Cohn played really well watching the game live. I named him the player of the game, and I thought he played really well. When I went back and watched the film, I graded him out higher than I thought he played even live. Just from the first series was he took a sack, right? He's got to know we can't block that guy, and he's got to throw that ball away. After that, however, he was as sharp with his decision making, with his timing, buying time when he needed to buy time, out of the pocket, in the pocket, climbing the pocket, getting the ball out quickly, being patient with his reads, being decisive when he needed to be, using his eyes to look defenders off when he needed to.
Or using his entire body when it comes to that screen pass to Logan Diggs on that touchdown. I mean,
And so there were just a lot of things like that were just some of the little things I felt in the past. Even my wife last week watching Virginia. So Angela watches when it's road games. She'll watch it with me if I'm not at the game. And she says, he doesn't really carry his fakes out really well. Now, after I kind of it's my wife. I'm so proud that she said that, because he was right. She was right, because that's something that she's heard me talk to my quarterbacks and receivers and yell at the screen before. And she was right. And so when you look at this game, that was something I thought his play fakes were much better. They were a lot more definitive. They were more like really ride that thing, really hammer that thing up there.
Yeah, there was one that was like he was in the mesh for a long time and pulled it to throw.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
So I just was really impressed overall with his performance, and that was as that was a really confident looking quarterback. And even his deep balls, the deep ball to Kevin Austin, it's a little underthrown, but he threw it with conviction. The ball he threw to Braden Lindsey that got broken up, that's about as good of a ball as you can throw. I mean, if Braden Lindsey's right hand's not getting held, it's right here. I mean, it's perfect placement. That was a safety coming over the top, and the safety hit Braden, but the safety couldn't get to the ball. I mean, if Braden could have got his right hand free, that's about as good of a throw as you're going to get. So I thought Jack Cohn's performance was even sharper and better watching it on the breakdown than I thought live, Vince. What were your thoughts on Jack?
I was trying to, really pump up Jack Cohn in the show last night because I thought he played really well. But then watching it back, I agree with you. Let me give you an example. On the play that I just referenced about the throwback to or the screenplay to Logan Diggs, I didn't realize there was a corner blitz that was coming from the side that the screen was supposed to be set up on. And Jack Cohn completely turns his body to pretend, to fake to Kyron over, because he was in that jet motion, right? Or the speed motion. He turns around, takes a Tom Brady-ish like step. Not, he's not going to be outrunning guys or anything. We know this, right? But he took a step to get out of the way. That's what Tom Brady is so good at. He takes that step, just give him enough so that he can get the ball to Logan Diggs. Earlier in the season, that's a sack to me. That's a sack because he sees that guy coming. He freaks out and he turtles. Right? He turtle shells it. He didn't do that. He takes the step to the side. He puts it right over, gets it to Logan Diggs, obviously, which ended up being a touchdown. Obviously, other good things happen on that play. But that's a microcosm of what I thought Jack Cohn did a really, really good job of. There were other times where there was just pressure in his face. It's a little sidestep, step in, throw it. I mean,
and a lot of time that pressure was because they were bringing more than Notre Dame had to block.
Correct.
Those are not offensive line issues. I thought for the most part the line did well. That they had a little bit of a busted. I don't know what the heck happened on that. They were backed up at their own goal line. And that was a really smart play because Jack knew he was getting close to the end zone. And if you get called for intentional grounding in the end zone, it's a safety.
That's right.
So he stops his feet real quick and just slams it down at Kyron Williams' feet, knowing
and it hit him in the calf. I mean,
right.
it hit him.
Knowing that, hey, if I go back any further, that was really good field awareness. If I go back any further, I'm in the end zone and it's going to be a safety. And there was nothing happening on that play because it wasn't a screen. It wasn't like he was waiting on Kyron to come free. It was a downfield pass. So there just was a jailbreaks pressure that Notre Dame just didn't pick up. It was one of the 5 or 6 just really bad plays from the line, which is, I mean, that's down because it used to be like, honestly, 15, 20, just like awful plays from the line. There's probably about 5 or 6. 2 of them happened on the first series. You know what I mean? So
seriously,
that was another one. But that was just, to me, a really sharp, like, okay, I got to do something quick here. And to your point about the whole turtle thing, he never kept his eyes. He saw the rush because, I mean, at that point in time, you have to see the rush. You can't be looking downfield like, oh, gee, right? I mean, hey, I know what we're running. We're running downfield routes. Nothing's coming open. Where do I go with this football? Because he also knew he couldn't just go down and take a sack either because, now you're taking a sack at the 1 yard line. And so to get that ball out was really good field awareness. So I thought he played really well. Another guy, Vince, that I thought played a lot better when I watched the film. To me, this is the best game Caden Madden has had all season. His pass blocking was solid. He didn't get beat. He still has to do a better job on help when there's no one for him to block. He's got to do a better job of finding work.
I actually thought he did better in this game than he has in the past.
Yes, but he's still late
because there's times in the past where he wouldn't help at all.
Right.
Number one. And number two, he would go help somebody that didn't need help. And I thought today or last night, I thought he did a better job of that. I thought he was still late too much. Needed, but I think he was late. I agree.
But he got there. I thought run game wise, though, Kane was real gritty in the run game. He played with some edge. He played with some physicality. His issue in the run game is the same issue that the entire line has, which is something we'll get to. And that is they play with poor angles. They don't understand like upfield shoulder, run side shoulder, whatever. We'll get to that. But I thought he was physical. I thought this was the best job he's done all season of moving his feet through contact. I thought that he played like this is what you and I hoped he would be, meaning he was never going to be an All-American. He was never going to be that guy. What we had hoped for was a guy that was going to be assignment correct and physical.
Mm-hmm.
And against Georgia Tech, he was assignment correct and he was physical. And you can live with that, right? I mean, you can live with that. And so that was good to see. I thought he played well. I thought Andrew Kristofic had a rough game. They were really beating him inside a lot with really quick movements that I don't think he handled really well. I didn't think Jarrett Patterson was really great in this game. He had a couple really good blocks, just like Andrew did. But the left side in the center weren't as strong in this game as they had been in the run game. I thought Kane was good. I thought Josh Lugg had some really good moments in the run game, and then there was times he just looked a little lost, and I thought he struggled obviously in the pass game.
Yeah, he really did.
But overall, it was a solid O-line performance. But Caden Madden for the first time all season graded out as my top lineman. Yeah. So
he was your top lineman. He was number one, huh?
Yeah.
Wow.
Because
that's impressive.
Like Joe Alt was graded out as the highest assignment correct wise.
Okay.
But he just doesn't move people because he's 18 years old. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. But it's impressive that a freshman continues to be so assignment correct. He had one. I think there was a miscommunication with him, Kristofic, and Jarrett Patterson on that first sack that they allowed. I don't know what the protection was, so I can't say definitely who it was because it was a 3-on-2.
Right.
Or I mean, it was a 3-on-3 with a twist and a second level fire. So I don't know who it was. I don't know if it was Kristoff was supposed to fan out, if Patterson was supposed to fan out, or if Alt was supposed to pass off and then step out. I don't know whose fault it was.
Right.
Other than that, I couldn't find a whole lot of fault with Alt in this game. Didn't do that on purpose.
I see what you did there.
But I felt Caden Madden was every bit as assignment correct as Joe Alt, but he was actually able to move people. If you go watch Logan Diggs' touchdown run, he did a really nice job of taking that, because it's what he does well, but he took that inside guy, and in the past he would hit that guy and just kind of
stalemate,
hit him, but he hit him and just kept driving him back and opened up about as easy as a cutback lane as you can find at the 5-yard line. And I don't care what bad Power 5 team you're playing, when you can walk into the end zone that kind of way on just an inside zone from the 5, that's a good run and play right there.
Yeah.
So that was good to see. And
I agree.
That was good to see in this game.
I agree. And he's going to need to continue to get better. I mean, yes, he graded out as the top guy, which is great. But he needs to be that leader and take everybody with him, I guess is the best way to put it. He on the TV copy, they mentioned something along the lines of, now we know each other and now we have better communication and things like that. It's like, okay, that's great and all, but you weren't even taking care of your business, let alone communicating with anybody else around you. So I'm glad that whatever has clicked, whatever light bulb has gone on, whatever it is, I just need to see more. And that'd be great. I mean, I'm not faulting his effort or anything. I think he did have a good game for him. I do, which is great. But if you want to be a playoff caliber team, you guys got to keep getting better. Got to keep getting better.
Yep, that's a key.
Yeah.
Third thing for me, I'm still concerned about the run game against a good defense, and the numbers have been great recently. And they've been able to take advantage of some things like 68-yard run on a quarterback read that's not really about the line blocking, and reverses and jet sweeps and things like that. I think Tommy Reese has called really good games, and I think the design is so much better now than it was before, because they're now running out of formations that they pass out of, which was not the case early in the season. And that may not sound like much, but that's a very important thing. So I was glad to see that. And but the lack of movement, the whole hand it off to your back and just let them find a place to go, when you're playing a defense that has the athletes at linebacker that Georgia has, or even that Ohio State has, and even though their defense isn't that good, or Oklahoma State or Cincinnati, those things aren't going to work as well, because you just can't out-talent good teams. And fortunately for Notre Dame during the stretch, that they've done a good job of being assignment correct, and the timing and things are better, and that's been a positive. The reality is that lack of movement, that whole, Kelly, we're a big duo team. We're just double teams.
That's
basically, they're just the play is just get a body on a body and let Kyron and Logan do their thing. And that's fine when you're playing teams that have garbage run defenses.
Right.
And that's what Notre Dame has faced this year and during this late year stretch. But that's not going to work against better teams. That still is a problem for me. That's still a bit of a concern for me.
And agreed.
My other negative was the receivers still don't do a good job, receivers and tight ends, with their releases. They just don't come off with the same sense of urgency that I want to see enough. It's getting better, but it's not there yet. And their spacing still isn't great on mesh stuff. Like it's good when it's like the post and the drag and the slide, that was spaced out perfectly, right? Like that stuff where you're coming from one side to the other. But when they're doing stuff where it's like 2 or 3 guys working on a concept together from the same side, the spacing, the timing, and what that is like one guy's got to go and then another guy's got to either jab or delay, and it's like a symphony, it's like an orchestra, man. Like, okay, now you go, now you go, now you go, and they just kind of go and then start slowing down as they get down the field, and it just doesn't look right. So that's something still got to improve, and that's something I noticed yesterday. And then the fifth thing is, Vince, I want to talk about, and I want to bring up John's super chat now.
There you go.
So John A1, thank you for the super chat, buddy. He says, since the backups got some PT, what do you think of the way the second and third team depth chart, mainly offensive line and receiver? So receiver is just Jaden Thomas, right? I mean, it's like
Matt Salerno, like those are the two guys.
Right, it's Jaden Thomas, and I thought Jaden's blocks well, and he's going to be fine. He's going to be a good player at Notre Dame. the backup offensive line, Vince, it was noticeable how much more athletic that second line is inside compared to the first line. When you look at, you had Rocco Spindler at left guard,
Right.
Zeke Krell at center, and John Dirksen at right guard. They are so much quicker off the ball than that other group. They have some of the same issues that the first team does in regards to not properly blocking. So that's kind of the issue that I have is there's way too much where you're running outside and the offensive line just never gets to the outside shoulder of the guy they're trying to block. I mean, that's just a nonstop thing, Vince. And you saw it again yesterday. Anytime they're running outside zone, it's like they're forced to cut back so quickly because they either turn or they just can't reach. And so we saw a lot of that. But the second team line was able to do actually a little bit better job with it because, now again, they were going up against some of Georgia Tech's backups. So this isn't like start the second team line. We're just observing how they performed.
Yeah,
they're just more athletic
from it. Yeah,
right. They're just more athletic. Now they're not as physical, but I thought John Dirksen was really quick off the ball. I thought Rocco played well for the first time he's ever played college football. I thought he did a nice job. He's physical and he's athletic. Like there was a play where he was coming backside. He looks over to the right and he sees that the back still has the ball, and so he just turns his head and just takes off for a DB. Just hey, go hunt for work. I like that.
I like that.
And
There's too much standing around for some guys.
Zeke Correll looked like Zeke Correll from last year.
Yes, he's so much more comfortable at center. He's so much more comfortable at center. And I was leading the charge for Zeke Correll to get a shot at guard.
Yeah.
I was because
he's a good football player.
He's a good football player. He's a good kid, and I thought that his opportunity at center was kind of taken away by keeping Patterson there, and give him an opportunity to start because he's proven that he can start. Well, he didn't do a great job at guard. I'll be the first one to admit it. He's a center, and he is so much more comfortable. It is so obvious how much more comfortable he is at center. So we had a question in the chat yesterday is, are we worried about the future at center? No, I'm not worried about Zeke Correll at center.
Because we've seen him in 3 games at center, and I think he's looked pretty good in all 3 games, including last night.
Yeah, absolutely.
His pad level is good. He was coming off the ball. He was playing with force. He was getting in the second level.
Yeah.
He just looked more comfortable there, which is surprising because he was a guard in high school.
Right.
But
and center's harder. Center's harder because, I know it sounds obvious, but you got to snap the ball, and it's harder to fire out with one hand than with two. It obviously it should make sense to people that it's harder to fire out when you're snapping the ball at the same time. But again, he's more comfortable there. So c'est la vie, you're going to be a center. That's great. So you're the starting center when Jarrett Patterson goes to the NFL in a few months.
That was nice to see. Tackle wise, Quinn Carroll to me is big and physical. He's not super. He needs to be an inside guy. Him and Michael Carmody both need to be inside guys, in my opinion. He's just not an edge guy. He just doesn't look like he's ever gotten that step back.
Yeah, I don't think Carmody has the footwork to be a tackle.
Or the mentality. That combination, or the mentality to be at that position. But I thought the inside guys, looked really good. I thought they played really well. And it was nice to see Zeke Correll get in there and look good again. And it was nice to see Rocco get some playing time. I can't believe it took them until game 11 to get Rocco Spindler snaps. But
it's going to be interesting because now there's officially 4 games left, which I thought was an interesting time to get him some playing time.
Oh, include going into the game.
I got you. If you go to the playoff, you got 4 games left, right?
Well, no, they have Stanford and then 2 playoff games.
No. Yesterday,
you're talking about going into the game.
Yeah,
yes. So going into the game. Yes.
So he got in as there were 4 games left to be played, right? So
yes.
I don't know if that was accidental, but I think that's interesting now if he's going to get any playing time moving forward. That's I guess the point that I was trying to make.
I got
in
you.
A roundabout way.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting. It'll certainly be interesting.
Yeah.
But that was sort of my takeaway from the second team offense. And then, of course, with Tyler Buckner, it's just he's more comfortable right now running that package than he is the whole offense, which we have been saying for a while. And that'll come. That's what the winter's for. That's what spring practice is for. That's what summer's for. That's what next fall camp will be for. Right now, he needs to focus on being the best quarterback he can be in that package. Because if you still don't think Jack Cohn's the best quarterback for this football team, I have nothing to tell you.
There's nothing we can do. I'm sorry.
Now we could question, is Jack Cohn a guy who can win a championship? Those are debates we can have, right? Can he beat, can he do to Georgia what he did to Georgia Tech? Very fair question. We'll have to find that out, right? But as far as who's the best quarterback for this football team, there's no question. It's Jack Cohn.
Right.
So that shouldn't be a
it's not
conversation
close
anymore.
It's not close. I mean, the way that they've handled the quarterback situation from the second half on is exactly what is perfect for this team.
Yeah.
Right. And the whole, if you have two quarterbacks, you've got none. That's not really true when it comes to this Notre Dame team. So,
right.
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, look, those things make sense, but not every situation is the same.
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
And that's one of those expressions I hate. I'm like, so when Ohio State was trying to decide between Dwayne Haskins and Joe Burrow, they had no quarterbacks.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
When Alabama had Mac Jones, Tua Tagovailoa, and Jalen Hurts on the same roster, they had no quarterbacks because they had a battle to figure out who number one was.
Right.
I get it, but it just doesn't always apply.
Yeah, exactly. Instead, 3 quarterbacks that were on that Alabama team are now, they all started this weekend in the NFL.
Yeah, it's not bad.
You know.
I just wish Notre Dame could do that for one guy.
It's fair.
Just saying. Real quick to back up this point that I was making earlier before we move on to the rest of before we move on to the defense and then start talking some college football playoff. So I wanted to kind of talk about the run game so that people don't start taking it like, oh, you're just looking to crush them and all that kind of stuff. Second half of the season, Notre Dame has played the number 96, 98, 99, 101, and 122 rush defenses in the country. Navy was the exception. Navy is not ranked number 44. Notre Dame ran for 150 yards against Navy and 4.8 yards per carry. And against Carolina, it was 7.1. Against Virginia, 6.6. Against Georgia Tech, 6.4. They went for over 200 yards in each of those games. So it has been aided by the fact that they have played bad teams. I mean, sure. I'm sorry, the numbers are what they are. These are crap teams on rush defense, and Notre Dame has done what a good team is supposed to do. But it does still give me pause to say, did they just magically get better as the second half of the season came around, or did the second half of the season welcome some struggles? We're going to find that out here in the postseason,
exactly.
Right? But that's my question. That's my concern still moving forward for this group.
Right. We still have one more game of concern. I mean, because look, Stanford's not going to put up much of a fight.
No, they're awful. I mean, they're a really, it is almost kind of sad how bad they are, to be honest with you. And I'm going to pull up their ranking now too. Stanford will be the worst rush defense Notre Dame has faced all year. They rank 127th. The only 3 teams behind them are Akron, Kansas, and Arkansas State. Massachusetts and Florida International both have better rush defenses than Stanford does. So does UConn by 15 spots.
UConn.
Yeah, they're
a team that
really
should be
bad.
Relegated at this point.
Yes.
Okay, so
is that a soccer term?
It is.
Okay.
Yes.
Here's what Stanford's rush defense has done in their really all season. 200 yards, first game, 200 yards allowed, 185, 247, 204, 228, 255, 100 to Washington State, who doesn't run the ball, 229, 441, 218, 350. Cal, who's now 4-6, yesterday, ran for 352 yards and averaged 10.4 yards a carry against Stanford.
Who ran for the 400?
That was Utah.
Okay.
Yeah, the week before against Arizona, well, actually it was 2 games before, but the game before they played Stanford, Cal ran for 28 yards on 24 carries against Arizona. Right. They've had some good games. They ran well on Oregon State, ran well on Colorado, ran well on Sacramento State. Went for 117 on Washington State, 155 on Oregon, 144 on Washington, 133 on TCU, 153 on Nevada, 28 against Arizona, and then against Stanford, 10.4. Their previous high that year, this season in yards per attempt for Cal was 7.5 against Sacramento State. Stanford is awful on defense. It is sad, actually, to see how far they've fallen. Like, I actually don't like that they've fallen this hard. It's almost like, well, it's time to take them off the schedule. They're that bad. But and they are after next year. They are off the schedule, as far as I know. And I hope that they would keep it that way. So Vince, let's talk defense.
Please.
Let's first start corner. Vince,
Well,
talk to me about what you thought from the corners from when you had a chance to go on the rewatch. Did you want to go somewhere else first?
No. I just want to talk a little bit overall, like watching this defense.
Yeah, go for it.
It was actually, and again, I said this last night that I enjoy watching an aggressive defense, but yes, they were aggressive. But as I watched it back, I was able to, notice some of the more intricate things that they were doing in the game plan that was being employed. And it made me appreciate the defense even more. And they pinned their ears back and they came with a reckless abandon, but it was under control and there was a clear plan to what they were trying to do. I was so impressed with Marcus Freeman's game plan defensively. And now, granted, the offense propped them up and allowed them to be aggressive and do some of the things that they were doing. But I would say the play of the defense also allowed the offense to do what they were doing and taking some chances and doing some things that they were doing. So it was both teams playing off of each other, but I had so much more appreciation for the defense looking back and watching the game back than I did watching it live. It was pretty darn close to, and nothing's perfect in football, but it was pretty darn close to a perfect defensive plan against this Georgia Tech team.
It was, and I thought that it was a lot of, we are way better than you, and so let's not overcomplicate this. Let's put our kids in position to be successful. Let's let our kids attack. Let's make sure that we do things that we believe schematically are going to give Georgia Tech problems and keep doing it till they stop it. And they never stopped it.
Exactly.
But there was also enough diversity to where it was even harder for them to get a read on what they were doing. So I agree with you, Vince. I thought it was the game plan was really, really, really good. And it was and just as important, because remember we talked about this again the North Carolina game. I said, actually, I thought the game plan was pretty good against North Carolina. It wasn't executed for a darn. And that's on the coaches. It's your job to get kids to, because I don't care how good your game plan is. If your kids can't execute it, that's on you as a coach. I mean, that's your job, right? What we've seen in the last two games is great game plans and great execution. And so I really believe like the light has turned on for Notre Dame and Marcus Freeman and his players. He feels good. It's like he knows now what they can do. They know what's expected of them in that defense. And I think I'll tell you where I was wrong. I think I was wrong in how long it would take to deprogram them out of Clark Lee's system.
Yeah.
Part of the reason why is I didn't think they were going to do that right away. I thought they would slowly kind of go away from that. He did that day one. It's like, and that's not a shot on Clark Lee. It's just like, look, we're just different philosophies. Like it's just completely different philosophy. That one worked great. I'm confident in saying that Marcus Freeman has a great deal of respect for Clark Lee and the job he did, but it's like, but I got to do it my way, right? That's why you hired me, is to do it the way I want to do it. If you just wanted someone to run Marcus Freeman's or Clark Lee's defense, you would have, done something different, right?
Exactly.
So I look at it and I say, boy, that it's just gone on, because the last time Notre Dame gave up 9 points or fewer in 3 straight games was in 1983. Yeah,
that's awesome.
1983 is the last time they've given up
that's
that
awesome.
few points in 3 games. So it's been impressive. I mean, the last time Bama's done it, the last time Alabama did it took me a lot longer because I just couldn't call Lou.
I was just gonna say good reresearch, because I know that you couldn't call Lou.
I had to actually do the research on it. I'm so lazy, but
you have an encyclopedia.
You get complacent when you're working with Lou. Yeah, you do.
That's what it is.
But the last time Bama's done it, as good as Bama's been on defense, the last time Bama's done it was 2016. So this isn't something like, oh, everybody does all the time. And it's been impressive. It's been impressive. And they've done it against some decent offenses, but Navy's not. But Virginia's still a good, even without the quarterback, they're better than 3 points.
Yeah.
Against most teams. But that part of it to me was impressive. And then before we go too much into this, there are a couple super chats here I want to get to, Vince.
Let's do it.
And I want to go back to the offensive line for this one. PK4ND says, I believe our offensive line, especially the right side, will be exposed for the false facade it is if we play Georgia Ohio State. Don't back down on your skepticism. As to say, to be the best, we must beat the best. I don't know why you would take anything we have said today. First of all, thank you for the super chat.
Absolutely.
But I don't know how anything that we could say is to say we are backing down our skepticism. We are football coaches. We look at the film and we tell you this is what we see. The reason we were critical of the offensive line at the beginning of the year is because that's what we saw in film. The reason we're praising them in the areas where we are praising them now is because that's what the film shows. But as I said very clearly, one of my points, I have it written down here, is run game concerns. And what we said is I don't think it translates against a team like Georgia. I mean, literally made that point. So, I wouldn't call it a facade. I mean, what they're doing is what they're doing, and they're doing it against bad teams. That's why I went and looked up what the teams that they play rank.
Look, this
and
is
made
not
that a point.
This is not a championship level offensive line.
No,
and
nor have we claimed it is.
Yeah, nor
but
have
just
we
coming out here and saying, yeah, they
that.
ran for that, but they still suck.
But we're not going to bang guys continuously if it's not warranted.
Right, Caden Madden played well Saturday.
Yeah.
I mean, do I think he's going to go play well against Georgia? It's irrelevant. That's not what the point of the show is. The point of the show is how did he do against Georgia Tech? And against Georgia Tech, he had his best game of the season.
And it's also important to remember and understand that, that they have gotten better, okay? But they were starting very low, very low. They
would have been almost impossible not to be better.
Exactly. They were digging themselves out of a hole. There's no question. And also the thing to remember is Tommy Rees is scheming his offense now to protect the offensive line. It's not, let's just line up in 12 and 13 personnel and run it down your throat. They're not doing that because they can't do that. Okay. Mm-hmm. And so he's doing things, the jet sweeps and the, things like that to get to the perimeter and all these different things, quick throws, RPOs, get the ball out of Jack Cohn's hand. A lot of that has to do with protecting the offensive line. So all those things go hand in hand with why things are getting better offensively for Notre Dame. Yes, the offensive line is playing better than they were, but Tommy Rees is doing a really good job of making sure that the offensive line is not the thing dragging them down offensively. So all of those things combined.
And then we also have it, Corey D. We will get to this. Okay. I don't want you to, kind of like with John A1, we see that we're going to bring that up because we're going to talk about the playoff committee.
Yes, we are.
Committee next. Jim Evans with the super chat. Thank you for that, Jim. He says, if Cohn plays well against Stanford and in a bowl game, he will go down as best one-year starters a la John Hewart and Kevin McDougal in Notre Dame history. Yeah, let's see who they play and see who they beat in the bowl game, or if they beat him. But yeah, I mean, he's 10-1 as a starter, right? I mean, it's a pretty good win percentage. I'm just saying,
it's all the math
pretty good.
To some people, so
yeah, that's right. That's right. So anyway,
he just wins, baby.
So back to the defense, Vince.
Yeah,
let's start with the corner play.
Please
talk to me about how what did you see from the corners? I had some takeaways from the corners. I wanted to see. I didn't focus them on a ton yesterday.
Right,
the corners and the safeties. I kind of focus on the box more. Watch the secondary later. What did you see? Because you were there, you could see more of.
I watched more of the secondary yesterday and focused more on the box today since I was present. I got a hooligan running around upstairs. Sorry about that, but From a cornerback perspective, I thought, my guy Hart, he struggled a little bit early. They really zeroed in on him on that slant route. I don't know why he took that to the outside. I think he was afraid of it being a go route to the outside. Nothing about that route being run said that to me. But he took that false step to the outside and it opened up the slant and obviously the ball was caught. So that wasn't good, but I thought he got better as time went on. I didn't even really notice Clarence Lewis, which is a good thing. I mean, I don't think that
until the third quarter, they tried to go at him in the third quarter unsuccessfly.
Yeah.
He blew up that screen. He had that guy in good coverage down the field. They tried to throw a comeback on him. He was the second late breaking on the route. The quarterback then was the second late throwing it.
Getting it out.
He was able to break up on it.
Right.
But I thought that was the big takeaway for me is I thought Clarence fundamentally and schematically was as good as he's been all year.
I thought Tariq Bracy played physical. I like the way Tariq played. Still having some issues. All three of them really getting off blocks. You and I talked about that before the show tonight. That concerns me because there's going to be teams that are going to abuse the perimeter more so than Georgia Tech was obviously able to do. And teams that can do that and get the ball outside quickly, that is going to be an issue. And so they need to do a better job of that.
Yeah. I think for me, overall, I thought the secondary was solid. I don't think they were great. I just don't think they were challenged because of how good the front seven is. So I couldn't really get a great feel on just how well they played for the most part. I'll say one guy that I was happy to see play better was Houston Griffith. He was more active, came downhill better.
Yeah.
He's still got to do a better job getting off
nice
blocks,
tackles.
and he's got to bring guys down in the backfield. But he was better. That was the key for me. Yeah. And I was surprised that they didn't play any of the freshman corners. That really surprised me in this game.
That's starting to annoy me, to be perfectly honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, you were getting like fifth-string quarterbacks on the field, but they played some special teams. Like, I don't know if they're trying to do a redshirt thing or something like that, because I know Ryan Barnes has played some special teams in the past. That made no sense to me that they didn't get the backup cornerbacks in the game. Because, corners are rarely ever 5-year players. Right. Rarely. And if they are 5-year players, they're not guys you're going to necessarily want to bring back as starters anyway. Rarely. So that was a little frustrating to me.
Yeah, it's concerning to me as well, because I was really hoping that that moving Ramon Henderson to safety would open up an opportunity for one of those freshmen, if not both, to get on the field. And we didn't see that at all, because Ramon Henderson was getting on the field earlier in the game as a corner, and we didn't see that at all. And that was disappointing to me. That's the one of the few things that I've been disappointed about with the defense, as far as subbing and things of that nature, is not dipping into your younger group of corners.
Yeah, that was frustrating. Couple second level guys I paid a lot of attention to, Vince. I didn't understand, and this isn't not understanding from a questioning them standpoint. It wasn't something I thought of, was why they would put Jordan Patelho at Rover. And so I just kind of looked around. But we just got some trolls in the chat tonight. Got to put people on timeout. Got to block some clowns.
I know. I've already blocked somebody earlier.
Yeah. So anyway, so I just didn't. Okay. Well, why are they doing this? Let me see. I gotta tell you, Vince, I was impressed how comfortable he looks in space. Now, he's got a lot to learn about playing in space. Like, don't go underneath a perimeter blocker. Go over top of it. Like on that 122-yard run, he's got to go over that and force that guy back inside to his help.
Right.
But other than that, he really covers a lot of ground, to the point that, not that he's a future Rover, because I don't think that he is, but I wonder if they're going to have to make some decisions about whether or not he's going to be a Viper or he's going to be a linebacker moving forward.
Interesting.
Or if the Viper is going to turn into more of what Marcus Freeman ideally wants than what it is now with Isaiah Foskey, who's more of a traditional edge player. Because his range and how he moves in space, he does not look like a defensive end. That was my big takeaway. The more I watched him yesterday, the more I'm like, wow, I don't know if putting this guy just on the edge all the time is necessarily utilizing his entire skill set. Whereas like with Isaiah Foskey, it's like, if you take him off the edge, I'm going to, you know what I mean? But with Jordan, it's a completely different skill set. That's kind of one of the things that I took away from.
And he got a lot more playing time yesterday than he's gotten in the past too.
Yeah, he played a lot. He played a lot at Rover last week as well. I mean, that just seems to be kind of okay. This is what they want to do, especially against teams that run perimeter stuff and run the ball. So it was interesting to see. And I thought Prince Collie, again, we talked about it last night. I went back and watched it, confirmed it. He's so much more comfortable now than he was the first time he stepped on the field. I mean, it's not a shock, but I mean, it's like significantly better than what he was the first time.
Yeah.
Now, again, still a freshman, still got to learn to take on blocks, play with better bad level times. I mean, man, he comes downhill in a hurry.
Because remember, he wasn't an early enrollee, right? He came in all, or June or whatever. So getting him up to speed, and they moved position. So he's a fire hose, man. Not overly surprised he wasn't amazing off that, but I will say that he is starting to come around. He's clearly looking more comfortable as he goes.
I didn't hear anything you just said. It was like, so I don't. If you want to try that again, you just said clearly looks better than he did. So if you want to,
what I was going to say was he was people have to remember he wasn't an early enrollee. And so he
Right.
came in into the summer and then into fall camp, and they moved his position. So,
Right.
you know, you want to talk about drinking out of a fire hose as a true freshman. I mean, he's had to learn 2 positions. And so him getting on the field.
Then they sent him back
second
for
position,
seconds at the fire hose. They sent him back for seconds at the fire hose when they moved him to the will.
Exactly. And so him being at first, I get it, man. Like, you get a pass, okay? You get a pass. You get a pass. Prince Kollie gets a pass, and now he's clearly getting more comfortable. And so that is obviously beneficial to him.
Yeah. Young defensive line. So I got to say, I didn't pay any attention to them because once they kind of got in the game, it was finish these articles, get these articles ready, start working on getting the show ready, those type of things. I had to go back and watch them. And I got to tell you, Vince, I don't know what Mike Elson is doing with the defensive line, but whatever it's doing, like everybody else on staff needs to be like taking notes.
It's the cookies.
It's got to be. It's got to be his wife and the kids with the cookies. I mean, it's got to be. Like every kid's like, I want cookies, and I don't get cookies because I didn't get sacks. There's sack cookies, right? Sack of cookies.
Yep.
And if you don't get sacks, you don't get cookies.
That's right.
Right? So they must be like great cookies, and they all want a sack of cookies.
Laced with something.
It just doesn't matter who he puts in the game.
I know, right?
When I thought Riley Mills was really good yesterday. Howard Cross was excellent yesterday. You look at Justin Adamiola was really good. I mean, the starters were good. Obviously, Myron played a really good game. Isaiah was a monster. Jason Adamiola was really good. Heinisch did his thing. But then Jacob Lacey goes in. He does a solid job. Howard Cross goes in. He hits 2 sacks. Riley Mills goes in. He's balling out. Alexander Ahrensberger is going to be a player. He's going to be a key part of this defensive line rotation moving forward. Nana is really stout in the run game. And then, we even saw Will Schweitzer a little bit. He looked rusty. His timing, because he missed a chunk of the season because he had the shoulder injury. And was it spring or fall?
I want to say fall, but I don't.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly when that was. But, then we saw Aiden Kanahana, and he looked good. I thought he was really impressive. And so when you go back
47
and watch,
or 46 or
92. He's 92.
Okay.
Schweitzer's 48.
Okay.
That was Schweitzer who you're thinking of, 48. I was really impressed with how he looked. And he's that big 300-plus pounder. We didn't see Gabriel Rubio, so I don't know if he's hurt or not, but we didn't see him at all. But I really liked what I saw from just everyone that they kept throwing on the defensive line. They play with great pad level. They all use their hands well. They all block, destruct. Like, it's just such a fundamentally sound team across the board, or unit across the board. It was really impressive, but there's a lot of talent there. It's not like when they were putting Aiden in the game and Ahrensberger and Nana was getting more time, and it wasn't like they were putting a bunch of kids that can't really play and some different guys like that. Like, these are guys that in 2017 would have been second stringers in the rotation
easily.
I mean, it was really impressive to see. He's done such a great job of recruiting and development. When you can put your backups in the game and they're playing basically just as fundamentally sound for the most part as your starters who are 4th and 5th year players, you're doing a heck of a job.
Yeah.
And I was just really impressed by the job he's doing. I'm going to have to disagree with my man, Jarrett Grace here, though. Shout out to the mustache Coach Elson was rocking and the sailor beanie. I got no problem with the sailor beanie, but the mustache is I'm sorry, Coach. I can't do it. I don't know what bet you lost or what you did, but the stash has got to go.
It was bad. It was.
Yeah.
It was. I shouldn't make the reference I'm thinking in my head, but it was not.
Don't.
It's not good. It's not good.
Yes,
not good.
So I really like the job that he's done. I liked the athleticism we saw from the front 7 as a whole when they put backups in the game. I mean, it was a group that was running around and playing aggressively.
The future's so bright on the front 7 for Notre Dame. I mean, and if you can have just a dominant front 7, you don't have to be dominant in the secondary.
Mm-hmm. It helps, but you're right.
Oh, it helps.
Right. You're absolutely right.
But yeah, I mean, and look, this is coming from a guy who's very confident in what these freshmen are going to bring to the table and what Hart can continue to do. He's not going anywhere after this year, right? So I'm still confident in the secondary, but man, when that front 7, it makes the secondary's job so much easier. So much easier.
Vince, any other takeaways from yesterday's game?
Not especially. Like I said, I really enjoyed watching it back just from a coach's perspective, from a game plan perspective. I just, but they figured out, and I want to reiterate this. When Isaiah Pryor is allowed to do what he does best and, just getting after the quarterback, coming off the edge, in the run game, they have done such a tremendous job of getting him involved in the every down defense, and just allowing him to be him. And he was buried on the bench under the last defensive regime. He was for this field.
Mm-hmm.
And he's proved he can do it. And I love it.
So Vince, let's talk about Notre Dame and the college football playoff. Let's go to that next, because when the first playoff rankings came out, Notre Dame was 10th, and I said, there's a pathway, but man, there's a lot that has to happen, and I just don't know if they can get there. And I got to tell you, and JKR Myers with a super chat, thank you for that. He also had a comment afterwards, said, Brian and Vince, this show is very therapeutic. Thanks. If Blake is able to return by the playoff, do we still hold him out until next season? If he's 100% healthy and strength and everything is back to normal, then I'd consider it. Yeah. I'd consider it. Yep. I don't know if I would start him, but, hey, look, let's work you in. I would probably work him in at right tackle, to be honest with you, just to help out Josh Lugg over there. Maybe they work him in with all at left tackle. I don't know. I don't know if I would work him into 70 snaps a game.
Right.
But I'm just really nervous about putting him out there too early, because with a 330-pounder, it's not just about being healed. It's about getting all the muscles around that knee back to full strength. Because if you're a 300, like a running back and a receiver could come back and maybe you're at 90, 95% strength-wise and you're going to be okay. But a kid that weighs 330 pounds is going to put a lot more burden on those ligaments and the knee and the muscles that attach the ligaments, because that's the danger zone when you talk about these type of injuries is you come back and you're not quite healthy there, and that's where another injury happens. Blake Fisher's future is too bright, in my opinion, to risk him if he's not just fully back. And look, your line's playing as well as it has all year. Keep building those guys up. Keep getting those guys ready to play. I just would be very nervous for Blake to come back too soon.
Yeah,
that's my big concern.
No, I get that. I get it,
but it's going to be tempting because he's really, really. But again, for me, it's not 100% healthy. He's got to be back to 100% strength. They got to put him through all the leg tests and all those type of things. I don't care. I mean, he can be 100% healthy, but if his muscles around his knee are not back to full strength, because it's a two-part process.
Yeah.
It's getting back to health and then getting your muscles and your body back to full conditioning and full strength. It's two different things. And for him, the second part is every bit as important as the first. And that's why I'd be nervous about it, because again, he's a 330-pound kid. So if he's back if he is 100% in both of those areas, then I'd consider it. I'd consider it. But thank you for the super chat, JKR.
Yeah. Is it wrong that as I glanced at that one originally over to the side as we're talking and I'm glancing, I thought it said this show's very pathetic. I was like, oh man, that's rough.
Somebody's projecting his own insecurities onto JKR Myers.
Man, that's harsh.
Yeah. Corey D with the super chat. Call me a paranoid Notre Dame fan, but I'm worried the committee will keep Notre Dame out based on personal dislike for them. These are conference affiliated people. These have been conference affiliated people from the beginning, and they've never disrespected Notre Dame. If anything, it's been beyond that, because you know what these people have more affiliation to than their conference? Bank accounts.
Yeah, you got that right.
And Notre Dame is good for the bank account, okay? And all these conferences want Notre Dame in their conference. If it comes back to Notre Dame, it's so-and-so from the such and such league, like the ACC people are not going to do anything negative to Notre Dame. The Big Ten people aren't going to do anything negative to Notre Dame, because if it comes back to Notre Dame that they did that, those two teams who desperately want Notre Dame in their league are going to say, well, we just blew our shot to have Notre Dame join our league. So plus the other thing is, I do think there's a level of integrity with these people to a degree that they, look, not everybody is corrupt and all these type of things. Some people have legitimate, hey, I want to do the job I was hired to do and I want to do it well. And, that's so. There are certainly going to be people like that. But if they bang Notre Dame because they dislike them, that would be the first time we've seen that.
Right.
Because Notre Dame got respect in 2014 before they collapsed. They got respect in 2015 until they lost the respect based on their own play. They had great respect. I mean, they were a 3 seed and they had a loss in 2017 before they went out and got embarrassed by Miami. The committee didn't do anything to Notre Dame. Notre Dame did something to Notre Dame. And 2000 last year, if the committee disliked Notre Dame, they had every reason in the world to leave Notre Dame out last year. They had an undefeated Group of 5 team in Cincinnati and a Notre Dame team that just got their butts whooped in the ACC championship game. If they ever wanted to disrespect Notre Dame, that would have been it. Because if I dislike Notre Dame, you know what I would love to do to Notre Dame? Is I would love to knock them out of the playoff and put in a Group of 5 team where Brian Kelly coached the previous year. Like, that would be the biggest slap in the face to Notre Dame. They had their chance to do it last year. Cincinnati was undefeated. They were 9-0. Notre Dame had just got curb stomped by Clemson in the ACC title game. They had their chance to disrespect Notre Dame if that was their goal. Now, again, this is a different committee, but I'm supposed to believe that committee was replaced. That everyone that left that committee that's on it now has all been replaced by people whose goal in life is to screw Notre Dame.
Right.
I don't think it's that.
Right.
I dislike what they're doing, but I think the dislike I have is a consistent, and it's not just Notre Dame that's getting screwed. There's other teams that I think they've done a bad job with too. But that's kind of what this part of the show is going to be about, is really looking at the playoff situation. Because to me, when I look at it, Vince, 10th in the first poll, and yeah, there were some teams that had played each other, but it's other than like crazy upsets like LSU beating Alabama,
right?
It's kind of fallen exactly how Notre Dame could have won. There's 2 things that haven't happened. Bama hasn't lost yet, and Cincinnati hasn't lost yet.
Right.
Other than that, this thing has played out almost exactly how Michigan has lost a game. Because here's the danger. If Michigan beat Michigan State, Michigan's in a situation where if they play Ohio State close this weekend, you could make a case that they should still be ahead of Notre Dame. I mean, think about that. An 11-1 Michigan against an 11-1 Notre Dame. Michigan would have a win over a top 15 Michigan State team. They would have a similar win over Wisconsin. They would then have a very close game with a top 5 Ohio State team. That's going to be a better resume than Notre Dame being 11-1 with who Notre Dame has beat, especially down the stretch. So the point is, we could have had that discussion. And again, and I'm talking about Michigan being undefeated until they lost Ohio State. So them losing to Michigan State, if they would have beat Michigan State, is what I'm saying. So Michigan State beating Michigan and then losing to Purdue and Ohio State was perfect for Notre Dame. Because now it's guaranteed that whoever loses the game this weekend is going to lose, is going to fall behind Notre Dame.
I agree with that.
That's my point.
Yeah.
Undefeated Michigan losing a close game to Ohio State doesn't necessarily fall behind Notre Dame. That's my point. Wake Forest gets knocked out. Oklahoma loses, right, to a team that, is a good team, but loses convincingly later in the season. Then this past weekend, same thing. Oregon not only lost, but Oregon got smashed. It's playing out really well. They've gone from 10. They're guaranteed to be, at least in my opinion, 5th. And we'll get into the Oklahoma thing here in a sec. Oklahoma State thing here in a second, but
because that's important.
Yeah, I just feel like, Vince, for me, boy, this thing has really played out about as well as Notre Dame could have hoped for.
You're not wrong, because when they were 10th, I was like, okay, we'll talk about them being able to get in because it'll make people watch and it will be, there's a possibility and I'll play along. That's cool.
And you really didn't think that they had a shot.
No.
I kept trying to tell you, man, look, you got to look at the chaos that's happened beforehand and upcoming.
Yeah.
I had a shot, but even then it's been more chaos than I thought.
But now, even with Oregon losing last night, okay, and I just wrote down what I think will be the top 7 tomorrow or Tuesday, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you still have 4 of those teams are going to play each other, right? You got 2 games that are going to involve 4 of those teams. So somebody's going to lose. And the odds are that the 2 losers are going to have 2 losses. So they're going to fall out. And I think it's going to be really hard for the committee to justify 2 lost teams to be in the playoff over a 1-loss Notre Dame.
Right.
Especially, and again, this is where yesterday's game comes into play, especially if they can repeat this performance that they had yesterday on Saturday. I mean, if they could put up a 50-burger again and they hold Stanford to under 10 points, you're talking about over 100 points scored, in 2 games. Notre Dame's rolling. And if the defense can hold them under 10 to single digits, the defense is rolling. And look, the committee's going to think about that, okay? And a 2-loss Alabama team who hasn't looked great, right? They didn't look good against
2 of their last 3 games. They haven't looked really all that great.
So they're kind of struggling, and then the committee's last view of Alabama could potentially be a loss, right, to Georgia. And the committee's last view of Michigan is going to be a loss to Ohio State because they're not going to play in the Big Ten championship. So they're going to be out. And there's only 4 teams left. So, it's a pretty high probability at this point that Notre Dame's going to make it into the Final Four. Now, how they rank them and where everybody's slotted and all of that, I think still leaves a little bit of something, we could debate that. But I'm really thinking that it's going to be Georgia, Ohio State, Cincinnati, and Notre Dame in the Final Four. So it's going to be very, very interesting. And I know you're muted.
Who again? You said Georgia, Ohio State, Notre Dame, and who?
Cincinnati.
Okay.
I think that's going to be
now. When you say Cincinnati, are you saying a 1-loss Cincinnati or an undefeated?
Okay. If Cincinnati gets a loss, I think they're out. I think the committee is looking for any reason possible to get Cincinnati out, and if they lose, Notre Dame hops over Cincinnati. Whether people like it or not, I know they got the head-to-head, but if you look at the track record, in the resume and everything else, Notre Dame's going to be in over Cincinnati. So I think a 1-loss Cincinnati team falls out because the committee will be so happy that Cincinnati lost that they will put them on the outside. They'll put them at 5 or 6 or something like that, but I think they'll be out. I do.
It's going to be interesting because I really look at it and I say, man, I don't know what's going to, like, does the chaos stop now? Like, that's the thing is, like, does the chaos stop now or is there more chaos left? Is there a Cincinnati loss to East Carolina coming up? Is there a Alabama losing to Auburn? I mean, 6-5 Auburn should have no business beating Bama, right? But, it's one of those things where you look at it and you say, I don't know how it's going to play out. I mean, that's the thing is there's so much potential chaos still left to be had. I mean, like, okay, Georgia's not losing to Georgia Tech, right? Like, that's not going to happen.
No.
But could Alabama lose to Auburn? That's possible.
It's possible. They got a backup quarterback. That's going to be tough. But, I mean, it's possible. They match up better than a lot of teams. I'll give them that for sure. So, yeah, that's absolutely possible.
Cincinnati plays a 7-4 East Carolina team, and then they got to play a now 10-1 Houston team. It just – there's so much potential chaos. I mean, Ohio State could go out and beat Michigan, think that they've arrived. Of course we're going to beat Wisconsin and go get upset by Wisconsin.
Right.
Do I think it's going to happen? No. But there's a lot of things that I didn't think were going to happen. I thought Utah could beat Oregon, but I didn't think they were going to beat Oregon 38-7.
Right.
In a game that really wasn't that close. I mean, it could have been worse. It's been such an insane year. And now here's the new kind of thing. And Mike Nolan, thank you for your super chat, Mike. I appreciate that.
Thanks, Mike.
Very, very much. Here's the next thing. There's the paranoia from Notre Dame fans, and some of it's somewhat justified, is, okay, what about Oklahoma State? Does Oklahoma State jump? Well, I think right now people are concerned about Oklahoma State because if Oklahoma State beats Oklahoma, they've only got to move up 1 spot ahead of Notre Dame, right? So they only got to move up 2 spots.
But
and then Notre Dame
Oklahoma
stays.
Again.
No, they wouldn't. They'd play Baylor unless Baylor gets upset by some like Texas Tech this weekend.
Okay.
Because Oklahoma and Baylor would both have 2 losses.
Gotcha.
And Baylor had the head-to-head. So if Oklahoma State beats Oklahoma, that's a little bit easier to see them jump in 2 spots while Notre Dame stays.
Yeah.
Oklahoma's not going to go from, what were they last week? Like 11th? What was Oklahoma
13?
last week? 13?
I think
they're
13.
not going to go from 13 to ahead of Notre Dame because they beat Oklahoma State, a team that was ranked behind Notre Dame. That's the thing is I don't see. And then if Oklahoma upsets Baylor and people say, well, that's going to jump them up. And my whole response is, look, the committee wasn't in love with Oklahoma when they were undefeated. I don't think beating Oklahoma State and Baylor is going to all of a sudden make people say, "Oh, okay, Oklahoma's arrived." I especially think with what the committee has looked at, right? Like, because what I try to do, Vince, when I have these conversations, is apply what the committee says that they're applying. Now, this has been the most inconsistent application of it, but the one thing they've looked at is this whole game control thing. And the reality is they have dinged teams for not blowing out bad teams. That's something that I think hurt Notre Dame early in the season. That's not happening anymore. But that's still happening to Oklahoma. Oklahoma is still having issues where they're not a real strong, they don't have a real strong game control thing. I mean, look, if you think about it, they only led Texas for like a minute in that game. I mean, they won the game, but they only led for a minute, and that's a 4-7 Texas team. You look at Kansas. I mean, they trailed Kansas longer, I believe, than they led against Kansas. Weren't they losing at halftime?
Mm-hmm.
So Oklahoma has a lot of games like that. So to me, if you're a Notre Dame fan, you should be pulling for Oklahoma to beat Oklahoma State this weekend.
100%.
Because I just don't see them going from there, because Oklahoma State, to me, has a much better resume than Oklahoma right now. And basically beating each other, and then whoever, so if Oklahoma wins, it's a rematch, because Oklahoma State would win the 2-loss tiebreaker over Baylor. If Oklahoma State wins, Baylor wins the 2-loss tiebreaker over Oklahoma, and it would be Oklahoma State and Baylor.
Gotcha.
That's how you.
Then you got to be a big Baylor fan,
right? And so, I don't think the committee loves the Big 12. We've seen one-loss Oklahoma teams kind of begrudgingly get put in. In 2019, they begrudgingly put Oklahoma in. Like, they were just praying that somebody, Georgia, please don't lose the second game. You know what I mean? Like, there are some things where I look at it and I say, I want to see how that's going to be handled, because I just don't think it's going to be. I just don't think the Big 12 is. Now, here's the exception. If Oklahoma State goes out there and just blasts Oklahoma and blasts Baylor, we could see an Ohio State 2014 situation where those blowouts over ranked teams jump them up.
Sure.
But winning a 7 to 10 point game, I don't think necessarily does that, assuming Notre Dame does what they need to do.
It's going to be a real conversation if Oklahoma State wins out and becomes the Big 12 champ. It's going to be a real conversation between them and Notre Dame.
I don't think their resume is as good as some people think it is. I will say that. And here's the reason I say that is because I'm looking at their resume and I'm seeing a 5-point win over a 5-6 team, a 1-point win over a 7-4 team, an 8-point win over a 4-7 team. They lost to a 6-5 team, Iowa State. They don't really have – they've been playing better lately. I mean, their last 4 wins have all been by double digits, by at least 21. But that's the same time Notre Dame got hot.
Yeah.
And I don't know if any of their wins – like they beat Texas Tech by 23 this weekend. Notre Dame, Texas Tech was 6-4. Notre Dame beat a 6-4 team the week before. And now 6-4, a 6-3 team the week before by 25. Well, Virginia had a quarterback. Texas Tech didn't even have a coach. You know what I mean? So they beat TCU by 46. TCU's 5-6. They're not that good of a team. They do have a nice one over Baylor. So I look at their schedule and I was like, I just don't know if there's any win that is going to jump out to the committee unless they're going to have to blast Oklahoma. They're going to have to blast Baylor. Assuming they don't do that, I'm not concerned about the Big 12. That'd be the only exception for me, is if they just crush the 2 teams that they play next, because they do play 2 top 15 teams. Yeah. Although if they beat Baylor, Oklahoma this weekend, then Oklahoma falls out of the top 15 and they're no longer there.
True.
So the Big 12 is the new kind of talking point you're seeing from the media and the anti-Notre Dame crowd that you see at ESPN so often. And Notre Dame doesn't have a 13th data point, So like Oklahoma State right now, one of their wins this season was a 7-point win over Southwest Missouri State. I mean, those things are going to matter. Oh, Notre Dame only lost but like, what is that clown from ESPN, the guy that does the SP Plus or whatever, Bill Connolly, right? That guy. I called out his thing, and he's like, well, the teams ranked ahead of Notre Dame didn't almost lose to Florida State, right? Well, and then he didn't realize that he had Texas A&M ranked ahead of Notre Dame. They beat Colorado by 3, right? I mean, it's like just a silly, childish thing to say. Well, Oklahoma State has a 7-point win over a FCS team.
Exactly.
A 3-loss FCS team. It's a good FCS team, but it's a 3-loss FCS team. So I just don't think their resume would hold up against Notre Dame's. And
because you're using logic. That's the problem.
But see, the committee has done a decent job.
I hope so.
That's why I say if it was Oklahoma, I'd be a little bit more nervous. Because let's be honest, Oklahoma is when you think Oklahoma, you think dollar signs, right? The SEC is not begging to get Oklahoma State into the SEC, right? They're begging to get Oklahoma in the SEC. There's a reason for that. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. But Vince, this past weekend, I don't know if it could have gone much better for Notre Dame. Again, I mean, you needed 2 teams ahead of you to lose. You knew one was guaranteed to lose.
Right.
And then Oklahoma State goes. And now, barring the Big 12 leaping them, which I think the only way the Big 12 leaps them will be after the championship games. I don't think it happens this weekend. I think that you're going to go into championship weekend ranked no lower than 5th.
I agree.
That's going to make a really interesting.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I think that I agree with you. I think they will rank 5th after that. Excuse me. I think they will be 5th. I just hope that's not where they stay. Because at this point, I can taste the college football playoff, and I want it. Like that's where I'm at now. Like I was lying to myself. I'm like, you know what? It's not that big of a deal to go to a good bowl, and you were
just trying to make yourself accept.
I was totally talking myself into it. Now I can taste it, and I want it, man. Like I want to be in the Final Four. I want to make that trip and watch Notre Dame, with this new offense and this dominant defense. I want them to shock some people. Somebody in the chat just now. And I want to pull this up, and it's where is it? I'm
going to pull up Corey's super chat while you're looking for that.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Michigan beats Ohio State, but loses to Wisconsin the next week. Yeah, that's a good dream, Corey, and I will be crossing my fingers. But
it's a great dream. It's a great dream
happening.
Now, if Michigan does beat Ohio State, could Wisconsin beat Michigan? Absolutely,
sure,
absolutely, because I think Michigan will be off of a high of beating Ohio State, and they will be
overlooking Wisconsin because they already pounded Wisconsin once. And this is look. I still don't think Wisconsin's great. I mean, they just beat Nebraska by 7, although everybody beats Nebraska by 7 or less.
Right,
I mean,
exactly.
I think their biggest margin of defeat this year in their 8 losses is still that 9-point loss to Ohio State. I believe that is still accurate, which is just, to me, absolutely insane, in my opinion. Yes, still 9. Nebraska's lost by 8, 7, 3, 3, 7, 5, 9, 7. That's
right. So here's the comment I was looking for. I think it's 20 LJP. It says, if Notre Dame makes the playoff, what are the odds that they come out with a new look and really open the offense up, attack, or where they try to establish the run? Did you not watch the game against Georgia Tech? They did not come out to try to establish the run. They've opened up the offense. That has occurred. Like that's happened. You just want them to continue to do it,
right,
and build off of what they're doing. They're not coming out and trying to establish the run anymore. That's not who they are anymore, at least for this year. So, be happy with that. That was all we saw yesterday. Go back and watch it, man. They or lady. But that's what they're doing, and that's what gets us so excited is that they are playing to the strengths of what they have.
Yeah. I just looked at this, Vince. Do you know that Nebraska this year has outscored their opponents by 70 points on the season?
Have they really?
70. They're 3-8.
That's unbelievable.
That's like absurd. Because they beat Fordham by 45. I mean, it's an FCS team.
That helps.
But even then, if you take that out, their 2 other wins, they have a 25-point win over Buffalo, and they have a 49-point win over Northwestern. I mean, that's absolutely insane. Absolutely insane. So, but the point being, there's still a lot of chaos to be had. I just don't think that the chaos stops now that we're in week 13 and we're getting ready for the college football playoff, or conference championship weekend. It's Cincinnati's got 2 games that they got to bring it. Now they brought it. Here's the thing: they brought it the first game. mean, they flat brought. That's a great comparison.
It really
a great
is.
comparison.
It really, because look, the 2016 Notre Dame team lost a lot of games.
Now, Notre Dame 2016 had a couple bad losses.
Sure.
One really. USC beat him convincingly, but to his point, Notre Dame lost to Texas by 3, Michigan State by 8, Duke by 3, NC State by 7, Stanford by 7, Navy to 1, Virginia Tech by 3. It wasn't until the USC game, and that was a really good USC team that beat them. That was the team that went to the Rose Bowl and beat Penn State and beat them by 18. And Notre Dame led early. Notre Dame led in the second quarter until Deshaun Kaiser threw that pick 6.
Yeah, that's right.
So, that's a really good comparison. Now, we'll see if Nebraska's capable of having that next year turnaround the way that Notre Dame did. But, I mean, that's a good comp. Because at first I was like, no, Notre Dame was – and then you go back and look and you're like, that's a very good comp. I'm looking up the stats right now just to see the overall numbers. But the Notre Dame team in 2016 outscored their opponents by 27. Because again, you had that one game of that Notre Dame had, and Notre Dame didn't have as many blowouts as Nebraska's have. But yeah, Notre Dame outscored their opponents the year that they went 4-8. It just doesn't happen very often.
Yeah, exactly.
So this past weekend, Vince, when you look at everything, or this upcoming weekend, it's going to be really intriguing to see what happens, because again, you're looking at the Georgia Tech game. Georgia Tech's not going to beat Georgia.
No.
The question is, however, does Kirby Smart look at what Notre Dame did and say, we got to do better? Is Notre Dame not even on his radar?
Or he doesn't even care
right now?
My guess is they're not even on his radar, but
for Notre Dame, you have that data point. Like, hey, you played these two teams a week apart. This gives you a bit of a gauge on where Notre Dame was. And I saw somebody in the chat say that Jeff Sims is going to play this weekend. If I'm Georgia Tech, there's no way I play Jeff Sims this weekend. He's going to get destroyed. If he's been banged up, you're not going to play him against that defense.
Right.
That would be insane. But you look at this weekend, Cincinnati plays at East Carolina. North Carolina plays at NC State. That's a game that Notre Dame fans need to keep an eye on. North Carolina is 6-5. If they can go out and beat an NC State team, you can look and say, down the stretch, North Carolina, after they lost Notre Dame, they beat Wake Forest, they beat a ranked NC State team. Their only loss was on the road in overtime to Pitt in a game that North Carolina had a chance to win. You've got Ohio State and Michigan. One of them is going to lose.
Yep.
Baylor at Texas Tech, that's a way outside shot to impact it. If Baylor loses to Texas Tech, then that sets up a rematch, all that kind of Oklahoma State rematch, which to me, I think takes some of the sizzle off of that. Plus, I don't think Oklahoma State's capable of beating Oklahoma twice.
Yeah.
They may beat them this weekend, but they're not going to beat them twice. And they'd have to do that if Baylor loses, because now Oklahoma doesn't have to worry about a tiebreaker.
Right.
Alabama and Auburn. I feel like this kind of Auburn team's even more dangerous because Auburn has shown flashes. Now their quarterback's out, but they got nothing to lose. And Bama has shown this year that they are more than capable of playing down to the level of the competition, more than we've seen. And this is what I was talking about during the offseason, Vince, that Bama's going to come back down to earth a little bit, right?
Sure.
We've seen that. Barely beat a bad Florida team. I can't believe Dan Mullen got fired today. Like, I thought they'd he played in the SEC championship last year.
Yeah,
I thought they'd kind of say, okay, like I thought they'd do to him what they did to BK after 2016. Hey, what's your plan to fix this thing?
Yeah, exactly.
They didn't even let him finish the season. But that's how bad it got in Florida. Alabama was a possession away from losing to them. Alabama was 2 blown possessions by LSU away from losing to a bad LSU team.
Mm-hmm.
They played well against Arkansas, but not great. I mean, Arkansas only lost by 7, but Bama had a 2-touchdown lead. Arkansas scored late to make it 7. They were the better team in that game.
For sure.
But, I mean, I don't know if I say it's a gimme that Alabama's going to go out and destroy them. I mean, that's a game that interests me. Wisconsin, Minnesota. That's another game that's going to have some intrigue.
Has Wisconsin locked up their division?
I don't think so.
Okay.
No, I don't think so. And that's let me go look at it here real quick. I believe I'm looking at the 2016 standings because that's what I was looking at a second ago to see what Notre Dame's points are. Like, that doesn't look right. That's got to be wrong. No, Wisconsin and Iowa are both 6-2. They're
Okay.
tied for the top. If Wisconsin loses and Iowa beats Nebraska, which is not a gimme,
Nope.
then Iowa wins the division. If Iowa and Wisconsin both lose, then you have in Purdue. Here's where it gets crazy. If Purdue beats Indiana at home, and if Minnesota beats Wisconsin, and Iowa loses to Nebraska, all of those things are possible. You'd have a 4-way tie in the Big Ten West
Between
with
Wisconsin,
3 losses.
Iowa,
Between Wisconsin,
Purdue,
Iowa, Minnesota, and Purdue.
Minnesota. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, because Minnesota's 5-3. Because remember, one of Minnesota's losses this year was to Bowling Green.
Wow.
So that could get crazy. So no, now Wisconsin is the only team in the Big Ten West right now that controls their own destiny. If they win this weekend, they're in because they have them. And if Iowa beats Nebraska and Wisconsin, they would both have 2 losses, but Wisconsin won the head-to-head.
Okay.
So they would get the nod there. So that's another one, Vince, that is going to be like, keep your eye out on that. But plus, even if Wisconsin wins the Big Ten West, an 8-4 Wisconsin team that then goes and loses to Ohio State or Michigan the next weekend is not going to be in the top 25 anymore.
Yeah,
and that really hurts Notre Dame's top 25.
Right?
They have 5.
5
because they've got 3 now. Right, they got 3 now. If they lose this weekend in Minnesota, that's 4.
Oh, I got.
And then if they then go lose to Ohio State, they'd have 5. They're out of the top 25 at that point in time.
Yeah, no question.
Which really hurts Notre Dame's resume, in my opinion. So then obviously Oklahoma State, and then Notre Dame and Stanford. So it's going to be a really, really interesting weekend.
Yet another fun week.
And then you look at like Notre Dame's opponents, like USC's at home against BYU. USC's a train wreck. But what if USC is able to pull off an upset over BYU? What does that do for Notre Dame's strength of schedule? You know, you look at other teams that Notre Dame has played. Florida State has a chance against Florida. You know, can they win that game, or does kind of Florida have a new life now that their coach has been fired, or do they just not care?
You're right.
Right now, all of a sudden, if Florida State beats Florida, they're going to be 6-6 in a bowl game. If they lose to Florida, they're going to really be kicking themselves about that Jacksonville State loss. Because if they'd have beat Jacksonville State, they'd have clinched a bowl spot already, which is absolutely absurd.
You know, I'm just gonna say, this is completely off topic, but FCS wins should not count towards bowls.
100%. Well, they don't.
Well, okay.
In my opinion, but it's about where they'd be ranked in the conference. Because nowadays you can actually, because there's so many bowls, if you rank like 6th in the conference
and have 5
and you're
wins.
5 and 7, you are still tied into that bowl tie-in where your conference is locked in. That's why, because there's so many now bowls now that they haven't been able to place them all. So they're bringing in more than 5 and 7 teams in recent years. We've actually seen teams with losing records play bowl games now.
It's true.
So it's man, it's a crazy weekend. Somebody asked, Matty K55, Matty, we haven't seen you in a while, man. Good to see you asking questions. Says, why is the Notre Dame Stanford game at 8 p.m.? Because just because Notre Dame is really good? Yeah. Yeah. That's it right there.
Because it's on Fox. It's a Fox game, and of course Fox is going to want a good game in prime time, or
right.
a good draw in prime time. Not a good game, but a good draw.
And Notre Dame will be a good draw. They're going to have the Ohio State and Michigan game at noon. Then they're going to have Notre Dame Stanford at 8 because look, because Notre Dame is going to probably be ranked 6th. There's a lot of teams, Bama, Cincinnati, Ohio State. I mean, there's going to be a lot. Oklahoma State, Oklahoma. They're all going to be like, okay, what happens with Notre Dame?
All those fans are going to be watching.
That's right. So it makes sense. It makes sense.
Yeah.
To have them there. So I completely understand that. So that's going to be an interesting game, but it's going to be another weekend of crazy football. Just crazy football.
And now that the Notre Dame game is slotted at that 8 o'clock, slot, it's 5 p.m. for Stanford, by the way.
That's right.
3-hour difference, Searcher. Yeah. Come on, man.
Be nice.
But I'm in a mood. But no, now that it's at 8 o'clock and I know it and there's nothing I can do to change it, I'm good with it because now I get to watch a lot of college football. Like from a personal sleep standpoint, I was like, come on, be an earlier game. But now that it's set in stone and it is what it is, now I get to watch a lot of college football, and it is what it is. So,
yes. Yes, and Tool Worker says Stanford won't show up. It doesn't matter. If Stanford shows up, they are still awful. I mean, they're awful. This is not the same Stanford team that played Oregon, and that was a fluky game anyway. They are a beat up team. And I'm looking at the slate again this weekend, Vince. Is that you?
What's me?
Is that sound or is that me? Okay, that must be me.
You
know how this the ESPN stupid
the ESPN
thing just randomly pops in for no reason. I've had it on for half an hour and it just
I really
now
don't
playing.
get that. I really don't understand that.
Yeah. So our guy Ladarius jumps in. We appreciate him always coming in. He says, I think Alabama will make history if we lose close to Georgia. I think we get in with 2 losses. I think a lot would have to happen for that. Because, and here's why I say that. When the first rankings came out, I 100% agreed with his comment.
Yeah,
I thought, and we said it on the show, the committee is setting Alabama up to stay in.
No question.
Alabama did not live up to their end of the bargain, though. Beating LSU by 6 in a game where LSU was leading and had multiple chances to win, beating Arkansas by a touchdown, Florida collapsing. Bama's resume is not as strong as it would have been. And if A&M loses again this weekend, it's really going to be problematic for them because and that could definitely happen this weekend. Texas A&M plays, I believe, I just saw it. Texas A&M plays at LSU.
Yes.
Now, they should beat them, but with LSU, you never know what LSU team is going to show up.
Right.
And now that LSU's last game of the year, they have no bowl game. LSU is either going to just not care, and Texas A&M is going to crush them, or they're going to beat Texas
complete
A&M.
opposite. Yeah.
So it's going to be a strange, crazy game. If Bama wins by 30, does Georgia still get in? Vince and I were having this conversation yesterday. I think it depends on what else happens in the rest. So if, let's say Bama beats Georgia, right? Or beats Auburn, okay? Mm-hmm. So Bama, because if Bama loses to Auburn and beats Georgia, I still don't think Bama's going to get in. And I think Georgia would still get in. It'll be just like the Ohio State-Penn State situation from 2016. If Bama beats Georgia by 30, they're 12-1. They're in, right, Vince? So they're in. If Ohio State wins out, they're in.
No doubt.
If Cincinnati wins out, they're in.
I think they're in at this point, yes.
So then you'd have to look at a one-loss Georgia team that just got blasted by Alabama in the SEC title game, who would probably have 0 to 1 wins over top 25 teams. That's assuming that's all going to depend on the ACC, SEC end of the season rivalry thing. Kentucky has to go to Louisville. If they go to Louisville and beat Louisville, then, yeah, they're in. Louisville's now won 2 games in a row. They smashed Syracuse 2 weeks ago. They smashed Duke. Louisville has finally figured it out. And the game before they won those 2 games, they barely lost to Clemson. They took Clemson down to the wire. So Louisville's kind of heated up a little bit. If they beat Kentucky, it's guaranteed Georgia will have 0 wins over top 25 teams, unless somehow they can convince themselves to keep Arkansas in, despite the fact Arkansas being 25th and just losing. Now, the way that the committee has gone, could we see a scenario in which they convince themselves to leave Arkansas in to make them look good? Sure. But Arkansas still has to beat Missouri. I think that they will. But yeah, Vince, so you're going to look at a one-loss Notre Dame team which will probably have 2 top 25 wins by then, Purdue and Wisconsin, because I think if Purdue beats Indiana,
I think
they'll jump back in.
Yeah.
And then Wisconsin will be in.
They're playing for a Big Ten championship, so
right.
They're in. Yeah.
Georgia will have at best 1 top 25 win, maybe 2 if the committee just decides, hey, we've got to get Georgia in. We have to keep Georgia in, and they need Arkansas to be up there. But if you look at who Georgia's beat, now the thing that Georgia can say is, hey, we've dominated our opponents, and that's true. But the first time they played a legitimate top 15 caliber team, they lose by 30. I think you'd have a hard time convincing me to keep them in. And the fact that they wouldn't be conference champs would even be more reason not to keep them in. And part of me could just be saying, I hope that happens, because I would just love to see the heads explode. It'd be like the end of Kingsman at ESPN, where just everybody's heads explode if Notre Dame got in over a one-loss Georgia team that had been ranked number 1 all year.
Yeah, right.
That would just be that alone to watch. Like, I have not watched, other than watching the committee say their rankings, I can't tell you the last time I turned on ESPN where it wasn't a game.
Yeah.
I haven't watched Game Day all year. I just don't watch ESPN. I would watch every second of that post-release show and I would tape every talk show thing that they do the next 2 days just to have so much fun watching these people lose their minds that Notre Dame got in over a second SEC team, which would be absolutely hilarious. But
somebody made a really good point in the chat, and I'm not even going to look for it, but they basically said if Alabama loses, of course they have 2 losses now, and that's an argument right there. But I think at best they'd be a 4 seed. And do you really want a rematch between Georgia and Alabama in the first round of the playoff? You're muted again.
That's a good point. That's a really good point.
Because I don't think you would. They try to avoid those things, and there's no way you can tell me that Alabama would be ranked 3rd.
Yeah.
I have a hard time with that. So
if you're talking about if Georgia beats them.
Correct.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Even if it's a close loss.
Because you can't justify keeping them at 3, a 2-loss 3 over an undefeated Cincinnati.
And there's no way Georgia's not 1.
Right.
So, yeah, I would have a real hard time seeing that, to be honest.
You're not going to keep Ohio State 4, to avoid the rematch. I mean, you're just not going to do it. These kind of responses funny. Tom A says, keep dreaming, Brian. Georgia is not getting blown out by Bama. Would put up my mortgage deed on it. Oh, okay. I never said they would. We were literally asked a question, what if they win by 30?
We were asked a hypothetical.
So I'm going to answer the question. Yeah. It's just like, oh, you're an idiot. I can't believe you asked that question. They're not going to win by 30. It was a question. So I'm going to answer the question. So I'm not dreaming about anything. I don't think Alabama's going to beat Georgia. Can they beat Georgia? Of course they can beat Georgia. Alabama's still a good football team. And as we've said, Alabama has played down to their competition. When Bama's been at their best this year is when they've played really highly. I mean, Ole Miss, for example. I think they've overlooked a couple teams. I think they overlooked Texas A&M. I think they overlooked LSU and Arkansas. But you don't know which Alabama team's going to show up. I don't think this is a great Bama team. I said it in the preseason. They haven't done anything to make me convince me otherwise. I think Georgia's a better team than them. I don't think they're going to lose. But to sit there and say it's not going to happen, that's just not how football works. That's just not how football works.
Yeah, especially this year.
But again, I was asked the question, what happens if they win by 30?
Right.
It wasn't a
prediction.
No.
It wasn't a prediction.
And I wouldn't just come on, well, hey, what about this scenario? What if Georgia loses by 30? I mean, I think we addressed it last night as sort of like a million different things. But again, I wasn't asked that. I was asked a question. So we'll have to see what happens. Ladarius says, do y'all think this can be a scenario like 2008 when Alabama was undefeated and Florida had 1 loss and got Alabama in the title game? This reminds me of the SEC 2008 season. And obviously, Florida won that game, went on to win the national title. Bama went and played Utah in the Sugar Bowl and got beat. I don't think this Bama team is as good as that Florida team.
Yeah.
That was a really, really dominant Florida team that just had a bad day against Ole Miss. Remember, that was the year that they lost to Ole Miss, and Tebow did that, never going to lose again. And he was right. They didn't. But I don't think this Bama team is that, because the thing about that Georgia team, that Florida team in 2008, that team had a really good defense. They weren't playing as good as they should have been early, but by the end of the year, I thought that was a really, really good Georgia defense. I mean, they were playing, to me, at a pretty high level. They gave up 31 points to Ole Miss and lost 31-30, and that was in September. After that, they gave up 7 to Arkansas, 21 to number 3 LSU, 5 to Kentucky, 10 to number 8 Georgia, 14 to Vandy, 6 to number 24 South Carolina, 15 at number 23 Florida State, gave up 20 to number 1 Bama. That defense was playing at a pretty high level when you consider that they were holding teams that were ranked in the top 25 to 10 to 20 points. They were playing at a pretty high level. This Bama team doesn't have that kind of defense. And this Bama team has a pretty great offense, but you know who else had a great offense? That 2008 Florida team. You know what I mean? Like, this is what they did points-wise after losing to Ole Miss. 38, 51, 63, 49, 42, 56, 70, 45, 31 against number one Bama. I mean, so again, I just don't think this Bama team is that good, is to that level of good as that Florida team. So I think Bama has to win. I think the thing that hurt Bama, Ladarius, is the fact that they had chances to just go out and just blow people out and prove that we're the second best team. We had one. It's the argument we've made about Notre Dame. If you have a one-loss Notre Dame against a one-loss Cincinnati, what you can say for certain is on that one Saturday, Cincinnati was better than Notre Dame. But if you look at the entire resume, you say, look, Notre Dame has been a better team than Cincinnati on the whole, and they're definitely a better team down the stretch. If Bama would have blown out LSU in Arkansas like they should have, then I think we'd be having a different conversation. But you can't watch Bama play down the stretch and convince me that they're number 2 team and deserve to be the first ever 2-loss team in the playoff. What Bama has to hope for is that there's utter chaos everywhere else. Cincinnati drops a game. Ohio State gets beat by Wisconsin. The Big 12 teams beat each other up.
Right.
Notre Dame is there, because then it's like, okay, now because the Pac-12 is out, the ACC is out. Now it's Cincinnati, it's the Big 10, and it's Notre Dame. Am I missing anybody? In the Big 12.
Big 12.
Right? So you need the Big 12 to be, you need the Big 12 to eliminate itself. So that means like
correct.
Oklahoma State beats Oklahoma this weekend, and then Baylor beats Oklahoma State in the title game. That's pretty much what Alabama needs to root for. And it would work pretty well for Notre Dame too. And then you need Cincinnati to lose a game, because I do think a 2-loss Bama would get in over a 1-loss Cincinnati. I unfortunately I do.
Yeah.
Because they'd lose at the same time. Right? They'd lose like a week apart. And so in Alabama's already ahead of Cincinnati with one more loss. What's the difference between 1-0 and 2-1? So you have to hope that Cincinnati loses, the Big 12 eliminates itself, and that's just Notre Dame. Or you have to hope that a 3-8 Stanford team beats Notre Dame and the Big 12. So you need 2 of those 3 things to happen. The problem is some of the schedules that, like Notre Dame losing to Stanford, is not going to happen. So at this point in time, you've got to hope, because whatever you feel about Brian Kelly, the one thing he has not done from the beginning of the 2017 season to now is lose to an unranked team. And I don't know if he's ever, I think other than South Florida in 2011, has he ever lost to a team like this except for 2016?
Except for 2016. Right. Yeah, I don't think so.
So they're not going to lose. Now, they may play ugly, but I still think an 11-1 Notre Dame team gets in over 11-2 Bama team. I don't know if you agree or disagree with that, Vince.
I'm not sure yet. I don't know. You just threw like 1,000 different scenarios at me, and my mind is completely spinning right now.
And you're being distracted by children.
Yes, I am.
Off on the side.
You can read me so well.
Yes. Yeah. So it's gonna be interesting. It's going to be interesting to see how it all plays.
The other interesting thing I think is going to be for Tuesday, since we're kind of previewing Tuesday and we're talking about it. I think there's a really good case for Ohio State jumping Alabama in this ranking.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And to see how that would play moving forward as well.
And that to our super chat. So Matt Koisher says Bama loses to unranked A&M team and only drops 2 to 3 spots. That will happen again when they lose to Georgia. Committee wants Bama in over Cincinnati. I agree with you completely. The committee wants them in. They're not, however, good if it comes down to a 1-loss Notre Dame and a 1-loss Ohio State and an undefeated Cincinnati.
Right.
Bama's not getting in.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. They need – there's no way you can convince me a 2-loss non-Power 5 champion. Because, again, we're not talking about if Bama loses to Auburn and then beats Georgia. That's a different scenario.
Right.
But we're talking about loses to – so you do not win your conference. So all the talking heads with the championships matter. Well, they don't have one. They didn't win their league. They lost 2 league games.
Right.
And they lost them both in the second half of the season. That's the other thing. So you're not going to get them in over an undefeated Cincinnati team. But that's to your point, Vince, to Matt's points, if they drop down to 3, which they should, the way Ohio State's playing right now. I agree. There's no excuse to have Bama ahead of Ohio State.
I'm sorry, Ohio State's playing better. They should be 2.
Because the one thing that was a knock on Ohio State last week was they had no big wins.
Right.
Well, they have now played a top 10 team and beat them by 49 in a game where they called off the dogs at halftime.
Smoked them.
I mean, it was 49-0 at halftime over the number 7 team in the country. Bama doesn't have that kind of win over a good team like that. They have a good 20-point win over Ole Miss, Ohio State has a 49-point win over Michigan State. So if they drop to 3 and Matt is correct that Bama loses to Georgia and only drops 2 spots, that knocks them out. So I think your point, Vince, is we're going to find out how bad the committee wants Alabama in by where they rank Tuesday night.
I agree, because they deserve to be 3 this week.
Yes.
They do.
Yes.
Based on everything.
Mm-hmm.
You name the data point, they deserve to be 3.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they're still in right now, but that flip, I believe, still needs to happen.
And they should still be in right now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, they should still be in. But I think they should be flipped. And then you've still got Ohio State and Michigan. And somebody says David Solomon says the committee wants Michigan, and I'm convinced of that. That's great. But when Ohio State puts a beat down on them, it doesn't matter what the committee wants, because it's not going to happen.
Yeah, the thing about Notre Dame Michigan and the committee is if Michigan wins out, they should be in.
Agreed. Because they're Big Ten champs.
But they're not going to put Michigan in with 2 losses. I mean, if the committee wanted them in, they would have them ranked in the top 4.
No chance.
If they really wanted them in. But I don't think the committee wants Michigan in. I just don't think the committee liked Michigan State.
Yeah.
I don't blame them. We thought Michigan State should have been behind, and Michigan should have been behind Notre Dame.
Right.
We both predicted blowout losses by Michigan State this past weekend, and it was even worse than we thought.
Oh.
Michigan State's not a great team. I think that's more of where the committee was coming from than they just love Michigan. Because I think if they really wanted Michigan in, they would do the same thing with Michigan that they did to Michigan and Cincinnati that they did with Alabama and Oregon and Ohio State and Cincinnati.
Right.
A bunch of one-loss teams they have ahead of Cincinnati.
Yep.
I think if the committee wanted Michigan in, they would have put him over Cincinnati. I don't think the committee wants Michigan. I think the committee wants a Big Ten team.
And they want Ohio State.
Right. I think they'd be okay with Michigan. Michigan's got a big fan base.
And they're a big brand.
They want one of those 2.
Yes,
that's the thing. They want one of those 2.
Yeah.
But it's going to take care of itself. If they beat Ohio State this weekend and beat Wisconsin, Michigan's, or Minnesota, or Purdue, or whoever comes out of the West, if they beat one of those teams, they deserve to be in. I mean, Michigan would have earned it. I mean, they would have some big wins under their belt. They'd have 2 wins over Wisconsin, a win over Ohio State, a close loss on the road to Michigan State. Their resume would be deserving of being in the playoff.
Now, Brian says, Vincent Brian, what team do you think is playing the best football right now? I think I got to go with Ohio State or Georgia, depending on how things shake out. But I think Ohio State right now is playing the best football. I'm going to
still go with Georgia.
Okay.
But here's my caveat. My caveat is, what does Ohio State's defense do to Michigan this weekend?
Yeah.
Because here's the thing. Here's what I felt all along. Georgia has the best defense in the country, hands down. Now, my point, Ben, is I don't think it's this generational defense that people talk about because they haven't been tested.
Mm-hmm.
Ohio State has the best offense in college football, hands down.
Agreed.
So the question is then, who has the best secondary unit? Georgia doesn't have a great offense. Ohio State doesn't have a great defense. Coming into this past weekend, I felt Georgia's offense is still better than Ohio State's defense. Was that fair?
Okay.
After watching what Ohio State did they completely annihilated Michigan State. And Michigan State's got a good offense. Our concern about that game was their defense sucks. That's why we thought they're going to get blown out.
Specifically the secondary.
Correct. I thought, they had the worst pass, literally ranked 130th in the country, just giving up 556 yards at Purdue 2 weeks before.
Right.
That's why I thought it was going to be like I predicted, I think 45-24, and I could have seen another touchdown.
Sure.
But I thought Michigan State was still going to at least score 21 to 24 points.
I
they
thought
shut
Michigan
Kenneth Walker down.
I thought Michigan State would be, I think the spread was 20. I thought they would be inside of that. They keep it somewhat close, but it'd be a decisive win for Ohio State. I was wrong within 8 minutes of the game being on.
Vince, they had the spread by the end of the first quarter.
Yeah.
And then some.
Yes, they did.
When I watched that game, Ohio State's defensive line just ate Michigan State up. That's not something. Even the week before against Purdue, the week before that against Penn State, the defense was okay. It wasn't special. One game's not going to make me be like, their defense has arrived.
Sure.
That's why I got to see what they do. If they give up 24 to 27 points to Michigan, I'm going to be like, okay, Georgia's still the best team because Georgia's offense is still better than Ohio State's defense. But if they shut Ohio State down or Michigan down in any similar fashion, like 17 points, 20 or fewer points, then I may have to go with Ohio State because their offense is playing at an insane level right now.
High level. Yeah.
Because they can run, they can throw. If you try to take away their pass game, then just Travion Henderson's going to go crazy.
Right.
He's kind of like a bigger version of Chris Tyree. I mean, just he's a burner, but he's a big burner. They're hard to beat, and we're going to find out this weekend too. The other thing we're going to find out about Ohio State this weekend is, can their offensive line hold up against a really good pass rush? Because C.J. Stroud has not looked great when he's played good defenses. Michigan State does not have a good defense, and he, I thought he took a good step forward against Purdue, who does have a quality defense this year, and ate them up. But he didn't look good against Penn State. He didn't look good against Oregon. There's been a couple. He didn't look good against Nebraska. If they protect him against Hutchinson and David Ajabo, then I'm going to be a believer in Ohio State's offense, like completely. Like I'm going to be completely bought in to them. But if they then win 52-31 against Michigan, then I want to say, yeah, they got the best defense in college football, but they're the best offense in college football. Their defense is still a mess.
Right.
So I still would lean towards Georgia, but I'm open to changing. Ask me again in a week, and I may have a different opinion. But that's a very, very good question.
Yep. And Ladarius has one. He says, I agree the Big Ten champ will be in.
Assuming it's a one-loss team.
And they're only in if it comes from the Michigan-Ohio State division. If Wisconsin can upset whoever that is, they're not getting in.
Yes.
They're just not. So
if a Big Ten East team wins the champ, because you're now guaranteed, because of now we got to Ohio State, Michigan with one loss each. Right. Guaranteed to have a one-loss East champ.
Correct.
They have to win because 9-3 Wisconsin is not getting in the college football playoff. And I think that's kind of what I think Ladarius is probably assuming.
I'm sure
that
he is.
The winner of the Michigan-Ohio State game wins it all. And I think it's safe. A safe assumption, although,
There's one more thing that I want to get to, because I'm not sure on the rule here. There's been a couple of people that have put into the chat that Notre Dame should schedule a 13th game. A 13th regular season game. I don't think that's allowed.
They can only do that if they play at Hawaii. So what the NCAA is allowed is like every some number of years, if you play at Hawaii as a non-conference, because it's an attempt to try to help teams. It's an attempt to try, in my opinion, to try to help Hawaii get non-conference games.
Okay.
That if you play at Hawaii, you can get an extra home game. In that season. So we've seen people do that before.
Interesting. Okay. I didn't realize that.
Yeah. So
Jarrett Grace, and I don't know if it's the Jarrett Grace, but he way earlier in the chat said something along the lines of there was negotiations for Notre Dame to play Stanford in China at one point. And that would be their 13th game. And Stanford was all about it because they want to apparently get that the Asian market or whatever for the Pac-12 or whatever.
Everybody's trying to get China money. I mean,
I mean, so I'm assuming that idea would go along the same lines of the Hawaii type game, or an Ireland game for Notre Dame if they could, But other than that, I don't think you're allowed to have 13. So
now, Navy does that all the time because when they play Army. So but it's not a regular season game. That's the difference. Because Navy, now that they're in a conference, they can play 13 if they play in the AAC title game, because they always play Army the week after.
That is true. So if they play in the championship, then they're playing a 13.
But so it doesn't count as a regular season game. It just looks that way because their 13th game is after the conference title games. 10-4. So, and that's the other thing is what makes it hard for a lot of teams. Not all teams that play Hawaii will take that 13th game, because of the conference championship games now.
Yeah, right.
Well, that's the other thing is like if you're a team that's is not going to win your conference championship. So that would be an interesting, very interesting to see how that plays out. But again, I think Notre Dame. And this is the one thing. So, you remember how I was really against what Jack Swarbrick did for the 12-team playoff, and then you talked me off the ledge, made a lot of sense, and I'm like, okay, yeah, it makes total sense. I'm on board with that now.
Mm-hmm.
But the one thing I still didn't like about he said is where he accepted the 13. He almost not really, but he said now I don't have to hear about the 13th data point anymore. He didn't accept it, he acknowledged it to the degree where it's he gave it relevance.
Right.
What he should be saying is, if your 13th data point is someone other than Mercer or Southwest Missouri State, or Prairie View A&M or one of these teams, then okay, cool. All right, you can talk to me. If your 13th data point is you scheduled an extra Power 5 team or a decent group of 5 team, sure, you can talk to me. But when your extra data point, if you're Georgia, is Charleston Southern, then I don't want to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, agreed.
So, don't come at me. You played UAB and Charleston Southern in your non-conference. So I don't think that's going to.
All right. I've got I was just going to throw that up there.
Yeah. This is good. So, Griff, what happened was when Notre Dame announced the 12-team playoff and that they could not be one of the top 4 seeds, I looked at that and I thought that was Jack Swarbrick finally giving in to joining a conference. I thought my initial read of that was he's giving in to the whole join a conference thing, because if you're going to get a top 4 seed, if you're going to just accept that you're not getting a top 4 seed, then you look at Notre Dame's schedule and say, well, you're guaranteed to have to play a team and you can't be a top 4 and then you're going to have to go. And I hated it. I didn't like it. And the point that Vince made, well, Vince, you can kind of make the argument, like kind of why I thought there's a lot of actual merit to that. So go ahead, and if you want to explain.
Well, because if you're good enough to have been a top 4 seed, right, and you're guaranteed to be lower than that, you're going to be a 5 or whatever, right? Number one, you're guaranteed a home game at Notre Dame Stadium in December, which, okay, that's a home field advantage in my opinion. So that's number one. And number two, you've already played one less game, right, than everybody else because of the 13th data point and all that other stuff. You're guaranteed to play like a 12 seed or a lower team that you probably are going to be, better than. And you're playing them at home in the snow, most likely. Like it then eliminates the whole 13th data point conversation, because you're basically saying, look, we'll take the 13th data point. We'll take the 13th game at home. And it's,
in December
against
a team from most likely the South.
Right. Absolutely. Because they're going to be a top 12 team.
It's a little chilly here in December.
You got that right. And so really it on the face of it, it looks like you're taking a hit because you're not getting that bye because you're not a top 4 team. But when it's really all said and done, you're going to be playing the same amount of games as those guys up there, and you're playing it at home, and you're playing a team that you should be favored against by a pretty good margin.
And the other thing you brought up too was you get that home game, that's more money. And if you play that game, you don't have as long off,
right,
as the teams get the bye. And that's not something we discussed earlier, which made a lot of sense too, is you actually kind of get a chance to get in there. And then the semifinal or the quarterfinal games, I believe, are neutral fields, correct? So they're going to be played at like bowl places. Am I correct on that?
Yeah, the first round was at the schools, right? The better seed.
Yeah, so it's not like Notre Dame has to go play. And if Notre Dame is, and this the other point Vince made too was, and maybe you brought it up again, but if Notre Dame's the 5 seed,
right?
If Notre Dame deserved to be in the top 4, they're going to be 5.
They're 5.
Well, then you're playing in the quarterfinal the 4, who you were better than,
right?
Exactly. So it made sense. Like it made sense. Like, and once I kind of got the emotion part out of it, I was like, you know what?
It's like he's conceding, but still benefiting at the same time.
It's almost like, hey, this isn't going to, look, here's the deal. The 12 team is happening. How can I make this the best thing for Notre Dame?
Right.
I thought he was giving it. The biggest problem for me was more the joining a conference. Like, it's inevitable they're going to have to join a conference. But the moral of Vince's story is actually, this makes it even better for them not to have a joint conference. This makes it easier for them because now there's more opportunities for the playoff, and you don't have, because there's only now 6 of the 12 are conference champs. So there's now 6 at-larges.
Right.
So there's the whole, well, Notre Dame shouldn't get in because they don't have a conference championship doesn't matter anymore, because there can only be 6 conference champions that mean anything. The 5 Power 5s plus whatever the highest ranked group of 6 team is, right? Because it's going to be the 6 highest ranked conference champs get in.
Right.
And so it's going to most years, it's going to be the Power 5 teams, and then Cincinnati, the AAC winner, or the Mountain West winner. Now, there may be the occasional year where the Pac-12 or the ACC sucks, and the Mountain West and the AAC may both have a team
in the top
higher.
12. Yeah.
But if that's the case, they're not going to take that garbage AAC team or ACC team or Pac-12 team and put them in over a Notre Dame team.
Correct.
So that's kind of why I came around and say, this actually makes a lot of sense, where this actually helps Notre Dame not have to join a conference.
Right.
And that's really ultimately where he swung me. And because I really, that was my big thing, Vince, is
you were hot, dude.
Oh, man, I was pissed.
You were
because I thought he was giving into the to the
Yeah.
to the joining the conference thing.
And I get that. Yeah, totally.
Yep. So that's kind of where that got interesting. And I'm gonna see if there's a couple other interesting ones here. And look, I think I love the conversation about the playoff system and what I like compared to what other people like. But for me, anyone that comes at me with what Joel Klatt has come up with, and other people are saying it too, which is a similar to the NFL, don't come at me with that. Because the NFL,
putting like divisions and
wasn't
he all about that?
The pods,
and
all, it's no. This isn't the NFL. This is college football. Stop trying to make if you like what the NFL does, then watch the NFL. Right. Stop trying to make college football like the NFL. That's kind of my thing. Josh Phillips says, as far as I know, 12-team playoff is already under talk again. It is, and happening as soon as next year or 2025 at the latest. Next year is not an option as far as I've been told.
It's not.
The earliest it would be is 2023.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
And even Ladarius laughing at Alabama's non-conference schedule. We played Mercer and New Mexico State. You are absolutely correct.
He's not wrong. I mean, that's the thing.
Yeah. Eric Fasano. Like it. Sparkling Swan asks, how would a 12-team playoff work? Would that make the regular season a shorter season, as in less games? No.
Nope.
They're not going to do that. Now, here's the thing about it is how it work. You have 4 seeds. The top 4 seeds get a bye. Now, for Notre Dame specifically, they cannot be one of the top 4 seeds. To be one of the top 4 seeds, you have – I believe they said this, that you have to be a conference
champion. Yes.
So
it's going to be the top 4 rated conference champion.
Right. So, for example,
the 5th is going to be out. They'll be someplace else.
So, Ohio State in 2016 made the college football playoff. In this format, they were a 4 seed. They were the 4 seed, I believe, correct? Because they lost to Clemson, who I believe was the 1 seed in 2016, right? No. Was Clemson anyway, Ohio State got in. They did not win the Big Ten that year. Penn State did, but Penn State had 2 losses. They lost to Michigan at the beginning of the year, and then lost to Ohio, and then lost to Pitt. So they won the Big Ten, but they had 2 losses. So Penn State did not get in the college football playoff. So in this format, Ohio State would still get in the playoff, but they could not be a top 4 seed. You'd have to have the top 4 conference champs. So the top 4 seeds get a bye. Right. Then it's 5.
I got it all written out here because I needed a visual for myself.
Go.
Okay, so it would be 5 versus 12. Mm-hmm. It would be 6 versus 11. It would be 7 versus 10, and 8 versus 9. Now, the next round, the 5-12 matchup, the winner of that would play the 4 seed. The 6-11 matchup, the winner would play the 3 seed. The 7-10 matchup, the winner would play the 2 seed. And then the 8-9 matchup, the winner would play the 1 seed. Does that sound right? Did I get that right? You're on mute again. You're on mute.
Ohio State was the number 3 seed in 2016. Somebody just clarified.
Okay.
But that was the point. But yeah, and now that starts to make it look like the NCAA tournament, right? 5-12, 5 plays 4, or the winner of that plays 4, 3-6. Winner of that plays like 2, right?
Yeah.
Or no, not 3-6. It would be 6. Like what'd you say, Vince? 6-11. The winner of that would play 3. Then and so 7 and 10, that winner would play 2, and then 8-9, that winner would play 1, right? So it's just like the NCAA tournament, right?
Yes,
it's like the second round of the NCAA tournament,
which
that's fine. If you want to be like something, be like another college sport, right? I mean, imagine that.
But again, if Notre Dame's the 5,
right,
they get to play the 12, and then they play the 4,
right?
Who they're probably better than anyway, if that's the scenario that we're discussing.
And we looked at, like, there was one year it would have been like Penn State, who had like 3 losses. One year it would have been like Memphis. One year it would have been UCF, and not the good undefeated UCF team. And the rankings would still come from the committee. The committee would still choose who 1 through 12 is. And so there would be some, but no, they're not going to shorten the season. It's still going to be 12 regular season games. Conference championship game, then the postseason would start in December. So one of the things I didn't like is if you're one of the conference champions, like if you win the Pac-12 but you don't get a top 4 seed, you're going to end up having to play 17 games, which is a lot for college football players because you'd play 13, 12 regular season plus a conference championship game. You'd have the play-in game, the quarterfinals, the semifinals, and the championship game.
17.
You could play up to 17 games.
Which is an NFL regular season.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
And that was one of my issues. You know, hey, take away a regular season game, right? To Sparkling Swan's point. But they're not going to do that because that means teams have to give up a home game, which means and they're not going to give up money to look out for players. I mean, we've already established that. That's been known for a long time. They're not going to sacrifice money for the well-being of the players. They never have, never will do that. They'll just find something else to do with, you know, hey, we'll give them this, we'll do that, we'll push it back more, which is actually a legitimate thing. If you put a break in between, like a 2-3 week break in between the playoff, then the 17 games does not have the same grueling effect,
of course,
that it does. Like D3, you to win the D3 championship, you've always had to win. Like as long as I've been involved in D3 as a player and as a coach, you had to win 15 games to win a championship, 14 to 15 games to win a championship. And so, but it was like regular season's over, 10 games, and it's right into the playoff. I mean, so that kind of got, you know, you got worn out. And that's what one of the things that made Mount Union so good is they were always so deep.
Yeah.
But there will be a break in between, and that at least a couple weeks, I imagine, Vince, right?
Yeah. Because you're looking at a 4-week tournament, right? You're looking at 4 extra games. So if you waited and then you started in like, the bowl games start like December 20th, you know, in that neighborhood, right? So let's say you waited till that week, right? And you started
it's
it. So
2 weeks.
You'd have 2 weeks off. You'd have 2 bye weeks. That's a lot of time to get right. And then, you know, you play the 20th, the 27th, you know, the first week of January, the second week of January, you're still having the championship game the same Monday that you normally do. You know what I mean?
And at worst, you push it back a week.
Right.
And a lot of this takes place when kids aren't in school.
Right.
That's the other thing.
Because they get a month off. They do get a month off, you know. And
some schools don't come back till mid-January.
Right. And they're used to playing during school.
Right.
I mean, that is a thing. But the playoffs would generally be when they don't have school. Maybe the championship game is during school. Okay.
Yeah, like first week back or 2. Yes, correct.
Right. During syllabus week. I mean,
but you know, a lot of schools, especially those in the South, they're going to just start making their schedules. Their January schedule. They'll just push it back.
Right.
Which would make a lot of sense.
Happen.
And it should. I mean, because honestly, you want your students to be able to go to those kind of games. I mean, if it's possible. I mean, whatever. So that's a good layout, Vince. A good layout of how that works. But that's. I mean, look, I've actually come around to that. I don't want a 12-team playoff. I don't. I you know the formula that I want. But if they're going to have a 12-team playoff, I don't dislike the way that they came up with it. I really don't. I there's a lot of merit to it, in my opinion.
Right. Darius, the first round games, the 5 through 12, would be an on-campus situation, not a neutral site. So
I would imagine that they would come up with some sort of requirements for you have to meet certain requirements to host
a game,
a home game. I would imagine. I would have to think that they would want to protect themselves against that 1 year that some random group of 6 team, group of 5 team
is higher than an 8.
Yeah.
Or is higher than a 9. It would be 8 or higher.
Yeah. I mean, you know,
because it'd be too tiny of a stadium.
Right.
You know,
or even like a Wake Forest. Do you really want to hold a playoff game at Wake Forest?
Right.
It's kind of a small stadium.
So here would be my rebuttal to
Cincinnati?
that. Cincinnati would be let's say, you know, I don't know. Let's say Georgia Tech, for example, is hosting, right? They're not going to have it at Georgia Tech. They'd have it at the Mercedes-Benz Dome or whatever, right?
Maybe.
They'd have that option.
They have that option. I don't know if they would or wouldn't. They should.
Because they play regular season games there, so I would assume that they would have that option.
I don't know if they would.
Okay.
I'm not saying that I'm not disagreeing. I'm saying
this is all hypothetical.
We literally don't know. When I say I don't know, I'm not questioning you or challenging you. I'm saying I literally don't know.
I would, if the committee's smart or whoever's making these decisions, I would put that as an option. For
right. But here's my point, Vince. Right. Here's my point.
Yeah.
Where is Wake Forest going to play? You really think they're going to give up a game to play in Charlotte? Because their stadium holds 31,500 people.
Right.
Do you really want to have a playoff game in a stadium that holds barely over? I mean, there's high school field stadiums bigger than that. That's the thing, is I think they'd have to kind of put in some kind of caveat of, if your stadium doesn't hold this, then you need to be able to work out. So, you need to. What I would do is I would have every school that doesn't meet that requirement present. You work out some kind of deal with some stadium place to say, hey, listen, if we make the playoff and we're a 5 to 8 seed, can we play that game at your place? And it has to be within like certain number of miles of your stadium, right? And you got to submit that to the NCAA. Hey, look, here's the contract we've signed, and here we go. So that way, if Wake Forest gets in. Otherwise, if you don't have that kind of deal worked out, then you got to go on the road. I mean, I think that would make some sense, because if it's about money and really
it's about money. It's about
do you
money.
really want to give up 40, 50,000 potential seats?
$100 a ticket seats?
I don't think you could if you look at it economically, you say, okay, well, then the tickets become in higher demand, but I don't know if you can increase the demand high enough to make up for 50 to 60,000. Because again, if you're talking about Notre Dame Stadium, it's about a little under 50,000 difference, and Notre Dame is a small stadium. If you're talking about Ohio Stadium or Penn State, you're talking about an 80,000 seat difference.
Right.
That you'd have to sacrifice. I'd have to think that would be part of the conversation.
See, and the guys in the chat are using logic. Yeah, they earn the right to host a game. I get that. Mm-hmm. But there's a reason whenever Notre Dame goes on the road to a lot of these places, they play in an NFL stadium.
But see, that would be something going in. They would have to make that rule going in, and everybody would have to agree to it. Like, look, here's the deal. They want to make
money. They want to make money. You guys have to remember that. This is all about money.
Right.
And there was
I would have a question, and Jarrett Grace might actually know the answer to this. I thought I read somewhere that part of the deal for Cincinnati joining the Big 12 is that there was going to be expansion to the stadium.
I would assume that would be accurate.
I thought that I remembered seeing that. I'm not 100% certain, but I thought I remember seeing that. But that would be interesting.
While you're looking, Hunter Land had a question. It says, what would happen if the top four have multiple 2 or more lost conference champs in a 12-team playoff? Doesn't matter. If they're a conference champion, the 4 highest rated conference champs are the Final Four.
Oh yes.
The Final Four are the the top 4.
Yeah.
So yeah, you could have 2 lost teams in there. That's the whole. That's what they decided. You have to be a conference champ to be in that top 4, and it could be that the 4 slot could have a 2 loss conference champ.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely possible.
And this is one of those years where that could happen.
Look at this year. Yeah. Well, Wisconsin could be a conference champ, and they would be slotted potentially in one of those top 4 spots.
Yeah, I mean, because you're looking at it to where the Pac-12 champ's going to be a 4-loss team, the ACC, or excuse me, a 2-loss team. The ACC at least the ACC is going to be at least a 2-loss champ. You have the Big Ten could be one if Wisconsin wins.
Correct.
And there's a scenario in which Alabama's a 2-loss conference. If Alabama loses to Auburn this week
and then beats Georgia,
right?
They could be a 2-loss. Yeah,
they're in. Because the reason we talk about Alabama is just assume they're going to get in, because if Bama loses to Auburn and Ole Miss beats Mississippi State, they're tied for first in the West. But Bama won the head-to-head, so Bama's clinched the SEC West. So for me, that's kind of my. I don't think it's going to happen often, Hunter. But it'd be a weird year like this.
But it's possible.
Yes, this is one of those weird years. I mean. It's honestly, Vince, it's not insane to say there's a chance that every Power 5 conference is going to have a 2-loss champ. It's not out of the realm of possibility.
I mean, think about it. Especially this year, man.
Wisconsin upsets Ohio State. I don't see it happening, but it's not out of the realm of possibility.
Right.
ACC's already that way. Pac-12's already that way. If Alabama loses to Auburn, which isn't, I mean, I don't think it's going to happen. But if it does, Alabama goes and beats Georgia, they're in, right? And then you'd have the Big 12. Oklahoma State beats Oklahoma, loses in a rematch to Baylor. I mean, these things are legitimate possibilities.
Yeah.
I don't see it happening, but the fact that we're going into week 13 and it's still possible means that there are going to be occasions where there will be 2 lost conference champs that will be among the top 4. I just don't think it's going to be often, to be honest with you.
Yep.
It's going to be real interesting to see if they change. Here's the thing that's going to be interesting. Do they change the wording from the top 6? Because remember, the original agreement is now basically gone. Because of Texas and Oklahoma and all the fallout that came, the original 12-team plan is gone. Now, they may go back to it in the identical form or similar form, which I think they'd like to. But what might happen is they can look at it and say, listen, the Big 12, we don't even know if it's going to be a legit thing anymore. The AAC just lost some of their best
bunch
teams.
Of guys to the Big 12.
So if the Big 12 survives, it's at the expense of the AAC.
Right.
Do we really want to have 6 now? Do we want to ensure? Because it was done originally to ensure that the group of 6 would have a team in. And now it's like, do we really want to ensure that they get in? Because a lot of the best group of 6 teams are now going to Power 5 teams. Or there may not be a Power 5 soon. Or we go to Super Conference. There's just all these different things. I can see them going down to 5 and saying it's just going to be the top 5 conference champs.
Right. And then Notre Dame would be 6. And then you figure it out from there, whatever.
Right.
Absolutely.
Well, no. The top 5 conference champs get in. You're not guaranteed because right now it's the top 6 conference champions get in.
Correct.
What I'm talking about is getting in. I'm not talking about the rankings. I'm talking about getting in.
I got you.
That's what I'm referring to.
10-4.
Yeah. So that's where I'm at. That's where I'm at. And yeah, so it's gonna be really, really interesting. We got a couple more things. And this one, Sid Irish says Notre Dame needs a lockdown, either Freeman or Fickle. I'm fine with Marcus Freeman. I wrote an article about that today. I do not want Luke Fickle as the head coach of Notre Dame. Yeah, I don't see it. So, but Vince, hey, listen, we're going to be back here talking about the same stuff in about 48 hours. So the show is hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell. Please give us a 5-star review, listen to your podcast, sign up for the message boards. Our schedule for the week. We have a show tomorrow at 12:30, normal show on Tuesday, normal show on Wednesday. We are going to put a show out on Thursday, but it's not going to be live because I'm going to spend time with my wife and I'm going to spend time watching football on Thursday. So we will not do a live show on Thursday, but we will record one. At the very least, I'll be able to do it and put one out. We're going to try to both do it, and then we'll put it out at our normal time on Thursday. And then, of course, Tuesday night, the college football playoff show starts at 7:00. We will probably get going around 7:30. Is where we're going to be on that. So we will have another show on Tuesday night talking about that.
Yep.
So a lot going on. We're not going, just because it's Thanksgiving, we're going to take one day off. That's it. And then Friday, we'll be back to our mailbag, Saturday post-game show, Sunday, all that other kind of good stuff. So, yeah, so that's where we're at. So anyway, not if I want to still have a wife. No, sirree. Notre Dame football is not my wife. Notre Dame football is my job and it's my passion, but it is not my wife and it is not my life.
Oh, yeah.
So anyway, I appreciate that very, very much. Everyone that was here tonight. So Jarrett Grace was with us. Haha, great show, guys. I've been working on some research for school the whole time, and you guys are keeping me sane. I believe Jarrett is in medical school right now.
Yeah, we had Jarrett on our show, our radio
the Saturday
show, one of the games. Yeah, he's
very
awesome.
nice.
What a great guy to have. What a great guest. So
Yep. So Jarrett, thanks for joining us. Everybody else, thanks for joining us. This has been a fun show. Always love talking about this fun kind of not specific to a game kind of thing. So Ladarius, our resident Alabama fan, we appreciate you being with us tonight too. Everybody else was with us, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So you all have a great rest of your night. We will talk to you all tomorrow, 12:30 sharp. Or I will talk to you all tomorrow, 12:30 sharp. Vince will be back Tuesday afternoon. He's going to make up for it because I believe you're going to be with us Tuesday night, correct,
yes,
Vince?
Sir.
Okay.
Yep.
There we go.
You got
all
it.
right, and then I'm going to be going on the radio in Texas, Waco area tomorrow, around 5 o'clock Eastern. So we're going to be talking a little bit Notre Dame college football playoffs. So be on the lookout for that tweet tomorrow. I've been on that show before. They're really good dudes. Enjoy them very much. So anyway, have a great rest of your night, y'all. We'll talk to you very, very soon.